Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Lots happening in the world of sport as always. Obviously, yesterday Everton were hit with their financial fair play breaches. They've been hit with a 10-point deduction, and they've come out and said they are going to appeal that 10-point deduction that has been handed down by the Premier League. Now, obviously, the Premier League wanted to get this concluded before the end of last season. That obviously wasn't the case. And now there's the potential of Southampton, Leicester, and Leeds taking legal action. And again, it completely changes the dynamic of how the league structure looks right now with who's where. They're only above Burnley on goal difference. And of course, there's now added pressure on the Premier League to continue their investigation and conclude their investigation into Manchester City. That has been dragging on for some time, and also speed up their investigation with Chelsea and what is going on at Stamford Bridge. So this has opened a can of worms, massively opened a can of worms, and there could be a lot of ramifications because of this points deduction. Now, we were all expecting a points deduction. There were some sources stating it was around, it could be as high as 16 points, 12 points. Everton themselves were expecting a 9-point deduction. They are planning to appeal the severity of the decision against them. I will say this though: they admitted guilt in their breach period. They said, "Yeah, no, we admitted guilt." So I don't know what really they can appeal on because if they do appeal and then the punishment gets reduced, other clubs may lodge appeals against that, and it just becomes a mess. Now, Everton, as I say, not the only club currently under the spotlight for their finances, for good or bad, and how they are funded. Obviously, the Football League, Sheffield Wednesday, and Reading have got their problems. In the non-league, obviously Southend and Scunthorpe have had issues quite recently, and of course there's the ongoing issues with the investigation into Manchester City and the beginnings of an investigation into Chelsea. So it's a bit of a mess, really. There are other clubs as well that have been highlighted as potentially breaching financial fair play or trying to work around financial fair play rules, and so the circus that is football's governance and football finances continues to go on and on and on and on. So there's that. Obviously, international break again. England played Malta last night, 2-0 winner at Wembley. A bit of a damp squib, really. And there will be criticism of the performance, but they've already qualified. It's all about making sure they have a good seeding when it comes to the Euro 2024 draw, where teams are placed into groups. It's all about group seeding now, and who ends up in what group for next year's tournament in Germany. Qualification is secure, so that's not an issue. And there's a lot of speculation about Gareth Southgate's future again, and selections and performances of players, etc., ad nauseum. So we've got that to look forward to with the rest of this international break, and the performances by England when players are in camp going into next summer's tournament in Germany. Scotland have been doing quite well as well when it comes to the qualifiers, which is refreshing to see Scotland improving and on the verge of making tournaments and being competitive in internationals again. I think Steve Clarke has done a fantastic job. I even stated when he was appointed, I think he was the right man for the job, and he's had a fantastic run with the side, and their performances are mirroring his coaching. They are much better than what they were when he took over. Scottish football on club lands, there's not a lot of money. Performances in Europe haven't been great. There's question marks over the competitiveness of the game north of the border, but when it comes to international football, Scotland have massively improved under Steve Clarke, and I do think he is the guy long term to take them forward and develop this team and build a platform and put the structures in place for future tournament runs and qualification campaigns, etc. Obviously, I did my Rugby World Cup review a couple of weeks ago. I I felt it wasn't the worst tournament, but some things came up in the comments section, and some things came up actually watching the tournament itself. The length of a World Cup and expanding it, the potential of expanding it. Um, they are proposing that they expand it going forward. They are making well, Rugby are making changes to the international calendar, for good or for bad, and we'll see how that plays out in coming years and how that impacts television rights, accessibility, finances, and player welfare. So things did come out. Obviously, the TMO yellow red card review system was a big talking point. Referee consistency was a big talking point, and also rule changes surrounding the tackle area, height of tackle, tackle technique, clear out technique, HIA protocols, all that kind of stuff. World Rugby, I think, is potentially concerned about litigation in regards to player welfare, especially around CTE, concussions, and just general player welfare post retirement and looking after players when they retire. Obviously, the finances of the sport are not in great fettle when it comes to club level. So there's issues with finance, and we've also seen a lot of players retire either from the international game or from the game entirely in recent weeks, and coaches lose their jobs. So always big moves when it comes to rugby union. Rugby League, IMG, and their criteria. Yes, the Super League, Challenge Championship, and League One, and the IMG criteria for teams and how they grade them. This is having an impact from the Super League down. They're restructuring the 18 and 95 Cup competition. They're planning to restructure the Challenge Cup competition. That's gone down like a sack of shit, by the way. And now they're grading Super League and Championship and League One clubs according to grading categories. That's not gone down well either because, in theory, as a London Broncos fan, in theory, next year we can have a fantastic season, win every single game, win the grand final, win the Challenge Cup final, the minor Super League winners, the League Shield winners, and still technically not meet the criteria thresholds that the IMG have set. Now, basically, you want to finish 12th or above in the Super League next season to guarantee, pretty much, or really boost your grading. Um, but I find this really interesting how they're going about trying to fix rugby league's problems. Really curious about how they're trying to fix the issues that blight the game. Um, really interesting because we're going in one direction and we're losing teams, we're losing player base, we're losing fan base, whereas Australia and New Zealand are expanding and growing. So it's a tale of two worlds, a tale of two hemispheres. The governance of rugby league in general is not great, to be honest on that. Even in Australia and New Zealand, there are issues with the governance. We can all agree on that. But the sport is in a much better place financially, health wise, growth of the game, growth player base, expanding to new markets. They are taking games to Vegas next year. It's what 3.5 months they're playing games in Vegas. So that's where the NRL are out at. The Super League. I mean, we could have the Salford Red Devils go out of business soon before too long, and they're facing the potential of going out of business completely. We're not talking about administration. We're not talking about Bradford Bull situation or a Witness Viking situation. We're talking completely cease to exist. There's issues surrounding the usage of the stadium long term, the AJ Bell in Greater Manchester. There's issues between the club and the council. Obviously, Salford City Football Club are getting in. Got a stadium now. Obviously, Sale have got a new stadium in the works, and the AJ Bell is the Red Devils' current home. And 15,000 Salford Red Devils fans have signed a petition urging, you know, action to be taken in regards to their team's longevity and future. Now, let's talk about some F1 news because obviously there's been a lot of criticism of hosting the F1 Grand Prix at Vegas and the way Liberty Media, the direction Liberty Media is taking the sport. And people go, "Oh, but look at the viewership figures. Look at the look at the engagement." Yeah, from the US market. This is not from the traditional F1 fan base. This is from the American fan base that's new to the sport. The Vegas street circuit has got problems. It's one of the longest circuits this year that they're going to race on for distance, and it's a street circuit. So the organisers have removed a lot of the road furniture, and it's created some problems. Manhole covers are flying up, and there's been issues in with limited free practice. There's been a lot of media commitments. There's been a lot of corporate commitments, and they're having a race day on a Saturday. So today, there's been limited running for drivers. Obviously, Sainz and Ocon hit that drain cover, wrote off their cars, which based chassis damage, and they've also been penalised where they start in the race. So there's been a lot of criticism from a lot of drivers. Max Verstappen has been very, very open in his critical assessment of the whole Vegas F1 race weekend. Very, very critical. And I think being a three-time world champion, I think you're allowed to be critical. On the other end of the spectrum, one of the most polarising drivers in the paddock is Lewis Hamilton, and he's lapping it up like the lapdog he is. I'm not a Lewis Hamilton fan. I think on a sporting point of view and a driver welfare point of view, because to have that little sleep and be basically doing all these corporate commitments while not actually having a true balanced race weekend, not having enough track time. So this is a welfare issue. We could have serious accidents here because of exhausted drivers. And people, well, they're athletes. They are. They are professional drivers. They're some of the best drivers in the world. Driving some of the fastest cars in the world. But there are a lot of issues around it. The way the weekend is structured. Max Verstappen, guys, it's 99% for show, 1% actually about the race on the track. Normally at street circuits, they wouldn't resurface the whole circuit. They would obviously leave that because it's a street circuit. It brings different characteristics to how the car will handle, how they grip, don't grip, turn, how it impacts the movement of the car. Most street circuits they will leave as the road tarmac, so they come up with harder compound tyres. In this case, they've resurfaced the whole bloody lot. And they've got these manhole covers, and there's been this failure on one of the main straights of a manhole cover that's popped up and written off two cars. Now, which completely hampered free practice one, and of course they're doing it very late at night. The fans aren't overly happy because when free practice one was cancelled after just 8 minutes, fans were basically ushered out their seats and told to move along, please. The timings, the time of day, the times they're racing as well are very odd. They're trying to jam this in. And with the modern regulations with F1 cars, they don't suit street circuits. They're much bigger, they're much longer, they're much wider than they used to be. And I just don't know. It's been a bit farcical, quite honestly. There's been a lot of criticism from a lot of motorsport fans about how the whole structure's going, and Liberty Media's direction they're taking the sport, which is purely aimed at the US market at this point. Purely aimed at the US market. I think they do risk alienating a large proportion of the existing fan base away from the sport. Now, I'm a massive motorsport fan. I love my World Endurance Championship. I love my European Le Mans Series. I love my TCR touring cars, my British touring car. I love my V8 supercars. I actually like watching NASCAR. And the reason why I like watching all these various forms of motorsport is the cars are pretty even. There's a good performance balance. The regulations are pretty clear. They don't use street circuits that often. TCR touring cars, they're at Macau this weekend and in the World Championship, but for the most part, they don't normally go on street circuits. There's balance of performance. So when one team or one manufacturer seems to have gained that little bit extra, they bring them back to earth, or they bring up the other manufacturers with a boost package or an aero package. So basically, what you're looking at is pretty across the board. It's now down to driver skill. It's down to a bit of strategy as well, but mechanical reliability and driver skill. We've seen some great racing in the various other motorsport categories that are out there. We've also seen a lot of regulation changes in a lot of motorsport, reflecting the changes, with government policies surrounding emissions, safety, and durability, and various other changes within the motoring industry. A lot of changes, um, but it's still pretty fun racing to watch. It's always good to watch good, even, fun motorsport. Now, as I say, the criticism aimed at Liberty Media, from the traditional F1 fan base, which is the Europeans and the Australasians, is quite visceral. They're being very, very critical of the way this Vegas Grand Prix weekend and the structure of the season and the changes to how race weekends work, the sprint race formats, and this format. There's been a lot of criticism thrown at Liberty Media. There's also been some criticism thrown at the previous F1 management, which was Bernie Eccleston and the FIA. The FIA have been roundly criticised. Well, with a lot of the city, it's becoming more like a TV soap opera than an actual sport. There's always been that ritz and glamour around F1, but it's only been in the last couple of years that they've actually started to crack the US market. So, and Liberty Media are a US organisation. They're very, very keen to grow the US fan base, which is fine. But at the risk of alienating your current existing hardcore fan base that turn up every race in Europe, and some of these iconic tracks like Spa, like Silverstone. Well, I'm more of a Donington fan or a Thruxton fan, but Silverstone's where the British Grand Prix is currently held, risk losing their status. We're talking iconic tracks that it's almost like you couldn't see an F1 calendar without them. Imagine Spa off the calendar; it just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. But it is what it is. There are, I think, some great tracks currently on in North America that could be brought up to F1 standard. Road America being one, Watkins Glen being another, that are fantastic facilities where endurance racing takes place, GT racing takes place, NASCAR goes. There are multiple tracks. Charlotte Motor Speedway has a great infield section, which has got several different combinations you can run it at. Really, they've modernised the Charlotte Motor Speedway, which is the home of US motorsport, especially NASCAR and IndyCar, with their headquarters being there. You've got Indianapolis, where they've been before. They've got Daytona's got a great infield section. Yet they're going for the street circuits in Miami and Vegas. Circuit of the Americas is not the best purpose-built racetrack, in my opinion, in the US. And I watch a lot of US motorsport. It's not the best, in my personal opinion. But we are where we are, and this is the direction Liberty Media want to take. Um, and Vegas as a city obviously wants to grow its sporting imprint more than just where the boxing and the wrestling goes and the MMA goes. They've now got professional sports teams in Vegas. They're trying to get more professional sports teams in Vegas, and of course, before Easter next year, the NRL goes to Vegas, and they've started their advertising campaign for the American market. They put basically a highlights package reel together the last couple of seasons, and there you go. Is it the best advert? No. But is it a very early attempt, very early on in the process, to target the US market? Yes. Vegas is a massive tourist destination. A lot of sports fans will go there because of the Raiders and the Golden Knights being teams in the city. It is a tourist destination anyway. And of course, you've got the sports gambling industry, which is a big thing in Vegas alongside the casinos and the resorts. So Vegas as a city obviously wants to bring sport in. Allegiant Stadium, they've already put advertising up around Allegiant Stadium, which is, a pretty impressive facility in the Vegas metro area. They're trying to get the Oakland A's there. That process is starting to, the cogs are turning with that. So we are seeing big moves, big moves with with things in regards to Vegas as a sporting location. Having an F1 race on the streets of Vegas, I'm not sure that's going to go down well, considering the, the way the fans were treated at the end of free practice. Well, when free practice one was red flagged, and just the complete shambles around this race weekend, and why two drivers who couldn't really avoid that loose drain cover are getting penalised. And most teams were in favour of not penalising them. There was one that vetoed. We know who they are. So there is that. Right, responding to comments quickly. On the Everton point deduction, it's a very harsh punishment. But as an Everton fan, knew it would happen the moment we started winning games and looking decent. A bit of a coincidence, the punishment happened when we started to get on a roll. No, I think it's more that the Premier League is fearing this independent regulator, and there's mounting pressure not only to investigate Everton, which they've done, but Man City and Chelsea. The FA Cup semi-finals returning to neutral stadiums. They should go back to having semi-finals at neutral venues. Having the semi-finals at Wembley takes the shine off the ground and the final. If you're not wealthy, it's a lot of money to pay travel accommodation to get down for the semi-final and to fork out money again for the final, especially if you're a club that's nowhere near London. Even if you're a club near London, it is bloody expensive. As somebody who lives near London, London is not an easy location, even for someone who lives 30, 40 miles outside London. It is a nightmare financially. The brief history of Chesterfield, got a couple of comments there. Which is just basically from saying thanks for the video. Then we get back. Right, let's have a look. That's the ones I haven't responded to. Everton, again, on the Everton side of things, yes, you are right. It was the 96-97 season that Middlesbrough got relegated as well, losing 2 cup finals that year. Everton are very lucky that this season we are seeing some of the worst teams to play in the Premier League. Derby could even give Burnley and Sheffield United a run for their money, and I agree with that. Someone says they think Everton can avoid relegation. Clearly, they're guilty and deserve punishment. I think Sean Dyche is doing a decent job with the resources available. But there's the potential, possibly, that this potential takeover doesn't go through. They collapse into administration, and that's another 9 points minimum that will get slapped on them. So they're not out of the woods yet. It's the group of life for the relegation zone. At least 2 teams will stay up. That normally would sink that number of points to start the season. Will be the lowest on record. Yeah, we could look at some record low points totals at the end of the season. There's a Barnsley fan who goes, nice video, keep it up, Red Army, with their win over Horseshoe in the FA Cup replay. The EIHL to make neck guards mandatory from the 2024-25 season. They have to make them mandatory after this incident. Totally agree. The women's state of origin going to become a 3-match series. It should have been a 3-game series from the start. It's a no-brainer. Yeah, the 2-game format didn't work. World Cup review. Semi-finals return to neutral stadiums. 100% it should. It's all about the money. Plenty of great venues to host semi-finals. Someone else going, I think it would be good to move out of Wembley. Apart from everything you mentioned, it would give fans in general a chance to attend such occasions, even though their team might not be involved. So you get the fans of the teams involved, plus interested neutral locals going along to watch. I hope that makes sense. 100% yes. While we're out of the Champions League, should only be the league winners as well. Yeah, that's not going to happen because of money. The only solution to that sort of part is it being grandfathered. This is the neck guards rule, being grandfathered in like helmets back in the day. Also, surely these leagues cannot plead ignorance anymore. That puts them in an interesting legal position. If anything goes to court cases over such injuries or worse, the judgment will take into account Johnson and a league subsequent measures or lack of thereof. Oh, the Black Belt Barrister, that is another channel. Then we have more on the World Cup review. Australia has much bigger problems than what people are aware of. Under the surface, it's a mess on union side's ability to be professional competitive. Bunker review was put in place because New Zealand and Australia complained and wanted to make the game faster, and they ended up not benefiting because the decisions were more accurate and exposing them as true. Someone had never heard of Cray Valley paper mills before their game against Charlton Athletic. The England Tonga Rugby League Test Series I expected better from Tonga in this Test series. Tonga are yet to beat us in a competitive game. They came close in 2017 in the World Cup. Um, do I think a month for a tournament is long enough? I replied to that. Difficult to know as rugby is such a physical sport. Load management and scheduling come into play. Also depends on how each round is structured and how many teams take part. Yeah, that's my response to that one. So yeah, so response to some of the recent comments that have been left on video. Some very interesting things to discuss. Obviously, the incidents involving surrounding Adam Johnson and the Nottingham Panthers Sheffield Steelers and his tragic passing. Obviously, we now know there's been an arrest for manslaughter. We know he's been arrested, but we can't mention his name because that's legal stuff. A lot of people online are risking any potential legal court proceedings by continually mentioning the player in question. But that brings up again the fact that neck guards are not mandatory above the NIHL level in the UK, and all the major leagues, the EIHL are saying they're going to be mandatory from next season, but all the other major leagues around the world in ice hockey, including obviously the NHL and the IIHF, are recommending but not making it a compulsory rule change yet. I think there's going to have to be a rule change there at some point, and we can discuss grandfathering rules and grandfathering them in and stuff like that. But I do think a change will be coming in that regard. There's too much at stake, really, for that not to be a thing. If we're being honest. Right, let's just see how the other channel's doing quickly. Let's have a look. What's going on? What is going on? What is going on? Right. So, in regards to going back to the Everton situation, it has opened a can of worms. So I've covered everything I want to cover basically right at this point. Yeah, the Everton situation has now opened a can of worms for the Premier League, the Football League as well, because there's some clubs in the Football League that have got some financial fair play issues and some money issues. And of course, this independent regulator that may or may not come in at some point. And I don't want to ramble on too much about it, but what what we've seen with the Everton situation is there's a lot of Everton fans seem to think that there's an agenda against Everton. We've known for a couple of years they've had financial fair play issues off the field. It's not a secret. It's a well known fact that they've been spending more money than they make, and they've been over that threshold by a significant amount, which they claimed they weren't. They were, and I do think there is some creative accounting. So I have sympathy for the fans and I have sympathy for Sean Dyche and his playing group. I do. But the ownership has put the club in this position. And unfortunately, Bill Kenwright is no longer here to answer questions because he's now passed away. But Bill Kenwright and his involvement with the club and his involvement with the board and his drive to get this new stadium built, which he's been, proposing for years. Bill Kenwright and those associated with Bill Kenwright and the existing board and the previous board have to take a fair proportion of criticism and blame because they've badly advised Mashiri, the current majority stakeholder, in where to spend his money. Then we have to look at the footballing department, scouting, the youth development, um, the appointment of coaches, the sacking of coaches. And I mean, we look at the Lampard situation when they appointed Frank Lampard. Yes, he keeps them up, but that was never going to work. Sean Dyche, I think, has done a fair job with the resources and the tools he's got available. The form this season has been slowly improving. They've been edging their way from the bottom of the table before they ended up with this points deduction. They are saying they're going to appeal. It's going to be interesting to see how that appeals process plays out. That's my personal opinion on that. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the appeals process plays out, um, how long it will take. The Premier League cannot allow the appeals process to drag on past the end of this season. That's fact. Um, that is undisputable fact. They cannot allow the appeals process to drag on too long. It's going to have to be a quick process. It's going to have to be a very transparent process, and there is a lot to delve into there. The the issue is though with this punishment, and that's for one breach. Man City have 115, and there's growing pressure on the Premier League to conclude that investigation. What is interesting is UEFA did find them guilty of their breaches when they investigated them. There was a statute of limitations that's on the UEFA rule book that meant Man City basically successfully overturned their punishment and paid a small fine. So basically, there is no statute of limitations in regards to the Premier League and what they can do and how they go about punishing Man City. Um, and with the Everton situation over one rule breach, they can't do anything less than kick Man City out of the Premier League, potentially all the way down to League Two. Potentially. Chelsea's very similar, multiple breaches that are being reported. Now, they're investigated but haven't been charged yet with anything. There will be obviously hearings and stuff, but the Man City situation has dragged on too long. Um, but this is what happens when weak governance is allowed to take hold, and for too long, with the current rules that are in place, rules are being breached blatantly. Flagrant breaches by club owners and clubs to work around the financial rules and other rules in place. Chelsea and Man City have fallen afoul of UEFA rules over youth signings and transfer policies. So um, Chelsea and Man City have been pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable on a level playing field. Wolves have been under the spotlight occasionally as well with some of their spending. Um, so this isn't just some of the big clubs in the Premier League, this is some of the other Premier League clubs as well. And then we obviously have the ongoing situation at Sheffield United and at Reading in the Football League. And Reading are the ones most likely to fall into administration completely. Players are going unpaid, staff are going unpaid or not being paid in full and on time. They've had multiple transfer embargoes, multiple um, multiple points deductions at this point. They're bottom of League One. Um, Ironically, if they hadn't had all those points, if they hadn't had the points deductions last season, they would have stayed up in the Championship. But that's with hindsight. There's been a lot of protests um, in regards to the situation at the club by fans. Politicians are now getting involved in regards to the situation at Reading. And Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, should I say, are not having a good time in the Championship either. Their owners obviously hit the financial wall, and again, questions do have to be asked about the fit and proper persons test, otherwise known as the directors test, and how some of these club owners were ever allowed to get ownership stakes in these football clubs, and it's quite troubling how the situation has manifested itself in regards to these current ownership groups that own these clubs. The situation that Reading find themselves in, that uh, um, Sheffield Wednesday find themselves in. Um, it's very, very troubling. Very, very, very troubling. And the fact that this is currently the situation is unacceptable. Personally, um, things should have not got to this stage. But then a lot of questions have to be asked over the Premier League and over the EFL with their directors' test, and how it's not fit for purpose, and how it's not protecting um, protecting clubs from what is quite clearly unfit owners. And the situation is quite serious. And that's just from a footballing standpoint. But I've fallen out of love with football over a significant period of time, and a lot of it is to do with the governance. A lot of it is to do with the amount of money in the game, how unaffordable it is for the average fan to go to a game now. I look at potentially potentially going. I mean, I could go to Reading games. I live local enough. It doesn't take me too long to get to the stadium. They've now built a brand new train station, Reading Green Park, which is round the corner from the stadium, primarily for the football club, partially, should I say, to ease issues with transport problems in the town centre on match days. I could quite easily go to a Reading game. I don't support Reading, but it's my local professional club. And I then have to factor in cost of tickets, cost of transport, and it's not a cheap endeavour. Even to only go a handful of stops from the train, I would have to get two trains and hope the trains are running that day. And there's a slight walk to the stadium, but that is something else I've got to factor in is transportation costs, which don't get factored in a lot of the time by football governing bodies. They don't factor in the cost to the fan to just get to the game, let alone purchase the ticket. They really don't. I don't think they do a lot of that factoring in. But yeah, the Reading's in a difficult spot. There has to be a lot of questions, as I say, asked of the Football League and their directors' test, the fit and proper persons test, and how how unfit that test is. Guy Young should never been allowed to be anywhere close to a football club, but the Football League passed him fit and proper. So there is that. Of course, there's been a lot of criticism aimed at Gareth Southgate and the England performance last night. Put it this way, they got the win. I've covered that earlier. They're qualified, as I say, for the Euros. They've just got to keep winning games, top their qualification group, because it's seeding for next year's Euros, which is going to be quite interesting to see how that plays out. There's a lot of people who are not happy with the current format for the European Championships, with how many teams are playing and how the knockout stages are worked out with who qualifies as the best third-place teams from the groups. That format was criticised a couple of years back when England and Italy met in the final. The group stage format was criticised then. I mean, I'm not sure an expanded format works for the Euros as well. But I'm saying that it does give us a bit more exposure to players and nations that otherwise wouldn't have made it to a Euros under previous formats. So some players are putting themselves in the shop window. We get to see some players and teams we wouldn't normally see. And I have to admit, at the last Euros, the delayed 2020 Euros, it was actually a pretty good tournament. The quality of football was pretty good, considering how the pandemic had massively impacted sport over the previous 18 months. The quality was actually quite good. I'm not gonna lie, it's quite a good tournament to watch. I didn't get to watch every single game, but it was a fun tournament to watch a couple of summers ago. I enjoyed it a lot. There was a lot of talking points to come out of that tournament, but it was, as I say, fun to watch. So there is that. Right, let's check some sports headlines quickly. We've covered comments and responses to comments earlier on. Let's see what's happening in the sports world. Leclerc is on pole in Las Vegas. Hamilton did not make it past the second session. That's interesting. Right. Leclerc is on pole. Sainz has made it to second. He has his grid penalty. Verstappen was third. Russell was fourth, and Albon was sixth. Hamilton and Perez were out in the second session. Both McLarens were out in the first session. Um, right. Da, 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 da. Max Verstappen's not happy. Carlos Sainz has been given his 10 grid penalty, which I think is a joke considering it was the manhole cover. The fact they've actually rebuilt the car and qualified second on merit to be put on to 12th with a track that's meant to be almost impossible to overtake on, he's going to have a tough race. But Leclerc's on pole. He's got 5 pole positions this season, so he's got a single lap pace. He can put a lap together. Right, so let's have a look. Both McLarens, that's bad. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton didn't have a great one. So the top 10, it's Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, although obviously Sainz has his grid penalty, George Russell, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Logan Sargent, that's his best ever qualified, Valtteri Bottas, Kevin Magnussen, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, who will be bumped up a spot because of Sainz's grid penalty, Nico Hulkenberg, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, Zhu Guanyu, Oscar Piastri, and Yuki Tsunoda. So there's your grid. Of course, Verstappen will be moved up to second because of Sainz's grid penalties. That's just coming in. Let's have a look at sport quickly. So Leclerc's on Vake's pole. Wales have got to beat Armenia today at 2 o'clock kickoff. So they've got to win against Armenia away in Armenia. That's a big thing. Obviously, that's the post Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey era. Obviously, the track issues have caused problems in Las Vegas in regards, as I've mentioned before. Everton obviously not happy with their 10-point deduction, which, as I say, has completely opened up a massive can of worms that I don't think can be closed now. Sale atop of the Gallagher Premiership. That's nice to see, considering that's ongoing. 2 English umpires will be umpiring the Cricket World Cup final. That's Richard Illingworth and Richard Kettleborough. So the two dicks are umpiring the Cricket World Cup final between India and Australia. England's defence was shambolic. Rahul Dravid is the guy coaching India to this, to this final. So let's have a look. Right, let's have a look at the report on the England Malta. So it was 2-0, and there was an own goal, and Harry Kane got a goal in 75 minutes. Phil Foden's Enrico Pepe, that was after 8 minutes. Harry Kane scored in the 75th minute. Let's see what the comment section has got to say on the BBC Sport website, and then I'll have a look at other news. Right. People have been composing for years that England won't pass forward in that cutting edge, heavy. Wow, this is a real go at Southgate. How bad does Southgate think James Ward-Prowse is if he'd rather play his third choice right back in midfield? I completely agree. Ward-Prowse has been a consistent midfielder, firstly, for a long time in clubland. dead ball specialist, which you always need. He's great on free kicks and corners and penalties. Why is he? How is he not making this England side? Gareth Southgate, I think, in that area has got it completely wrong. Let's see. This has got a long thread. You don't um, you don't need a locksmith to crack Trent. He accommodates players from their club teams not on form, hence Maguire and not Branthwaite Henderson instead of Enzo. Southgate has his favourites. Just ask Ben White if you happen to have a brain and think to yourself, and Gareth doesn't want you. So he keeps speaking once at bench warm as well, telling others they need to get first team football if they want to be in the squad. The man's a hypocrite. Trent, 55 Premier League assists from right back, 25 years old. Ward-Prowse, 51 assists from midfield. Say less. That's a joke or a comment. What does go through Southgate mind is a complete mystery. Sterling was undroppable when he was rubbish, unpickable when he's brilliant. Rashford on fire was on the bench, now he's obviously keeps Sterling out. Point. Ward-Prowse, as I keep telling fans, has had a tendency to give the ball away midfield too much. Dead ball expert, but two on the way. God. He's given 60 debuts to players in his time as England manager. I'll give you that. Shocking performance, 3 shots on target against Malta. Gets shut of this idiot Southgate. He's strangling creativity of a generation of talent, class players scared to express themselves going forward in case it upsets him and they do not get selected again. Played more backward passes tonight. I'd have Trent in the team over Grealish 100 times out of 100. Trent, Rice, Bellingham, Foden, Saka and Kane up to goal. Oh, wow, this is a very, very angry one. Never been a Southgate fan. He can do the PR woke stuff, but he's tactically inept. As I've said earlier many times, he's cost us World Cups in final and a Euro final. We're failing to focus on our biggest strength, Premier League style football. With both games went up 1 earlier on, and instead of going for it, we sat back the way Southgate always does. This is going to go better. Don't know who we can get to play Southgate. That's the problem. I think he's going to continue to move into a more advanced. Southgate has his style. So basically, there's a lot of fans critical of Gareth Southgate, and and the style of play and just how England are winning games, but they're not winning them pretty. Right. What other big points deductions have there been? Here's one. This is an interesting article. So Everton have had 10 points taken away from them. Everton's record 10-point deduction for breaching Premier League financial rules may be the first of its kind, but it's not the only time English clubs have been hit with a penalty. Right. Okay. Right. Over 100 years. Here we go. So 2021-2022 season, Derby County had a 21-point deduction in total. Administration and financial mismanagement. 2019-2020, Bury had 12 points. They went insolvent, went out of business. 2009-2010, 9 points for Portsmouth for administration. 2008-2009, Luton Town, 30 points. Irregular transfer dealings and breaking exiting administration rules. Yeah, 2008-2009, Bournemouth, Rotherham, Darlington, 17, 17 and 10 points for administration. 2007-2008, 15 points, failure to exit administration correctly. 96-97, Middlesbrough, 3 points, failing to fulfil a fixture. 1990-91, Arsenal 2 points, and Manchester United 1 point for an on-pitch brawl in October 1990. This is interesting. So Arsenal and Manchester United became the first English top-flight teams in 100 years to have points deducted following an on-pitch brawl during the match in the old Division 1 on the 20th of October 1990 at Old Trafford. The incident only lasted 30 seconds, but involved 21 of the 22 players on the pitch, with Arsenal duo Anders Limpar and Nigel Winterburn the only ones to be booked, although a number of players from both sides were later fined by their clubs. The Football Association deducted Arsenal 2 points and Manchester United 1 point, although the Gunners still went on to finish as champions, ending 7 points clear Second place Liverpool, with United coming sixth. May 1990. Swindon denied promotion, illegal player payments. Swindon Town beat Sunderland 1-0 in the playoff final at Wembley and celebrated what they thought was promotion to the First Division. 10 days later, Swindon were found guilty on 35 counts of illegal player payments, and Sunderland were promoted instead. Swindon were originally dropped to the third tier as punishment, but on appeal that was reduced just to be back in the second tier where they started. 1890, 1891, Sunderland, 2 points, a registration issue. Teams being deducted points is nothing new. If we go back to 133 years, the first example of an English top flight side being penalised, Scotland international goalkeeper Ned Doig played for Sunderland, but he had not been registered with the club for the required 7 days and therefore was still effectively a Blackburn player. Blackburn fans, so that's interesting. Sunderland lost 2 points, which dropped them from 5th to 7th at the end of the season. So there's some interesting ones, but there's some big punishments in there. So the Everton punishment isn't as big as people think. It's a big one, biggest Premier League one, but it's not the biggest one we've ever seen. I mean, 21 points for Derby County. Bury got 12 points. Portsmouth had 9 points. Luton Town, 30 points. Bournemouth, Rotherham and Darlington had between 10 and 17 points depending on the club. That was in the same season. Leeds United had 15. So, as I say, not the biggest punishment, but the biggest in modern times. But as I say, it's opened a can of worms, and of course, we could potentially see if and when the Man City's investigation is concluded, a far bigger punishment than what we've seen for Everton. A fine will not suffice. I don't think that will cut it. Do not think that will cut it at all. With fans, and it can't cut it if we're being honest. Let's have a look at some of the news and some of the other major leagues around the world. Ooh, this is interesting. I just put in NHL news. This article's come up. NHL draft change anticipated by 2025, if not sooner. So next year then. Potential for World Cup participation in the 2026 Olympics, the Global Series in Sweden. A change is coming to the NHL draft, but the league may wait until 2025 to implement it, although it could come as soon as next year. Speaking before the first game of the 2023 NHL Global Series, Sweden, presented by Fastenal on Thursday, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly discussed the draft and other topics, including plans for a World Cup and participation by NHL players in the 2026 Milano Cortina Olympics in Italy. Bettman said the idea of exploring the change where most team representatives will stay in their home cities instead of having all 32 clubs represented on the draft will came from a few teams. So it's not overly like changing draft rules, just to be at the draft table. The Arizona Coyotes arena situations. The Coyotes need a new building and it's being worked on. And my anticipation is that at some point in the middle of the season, plans should get locked down and we'll be ready to understand how long term what the building situation will be. Hopefully, it will be a building coming out of the ground in the right place in Greater Phoenix. So that sounds positive. Possible expansion. We get expressions of interest on a regular basis. You hear me name Quebec, Atlanta, Houston, Salt Lake, but we're not in expansion mode. We take meetings, we listen, but we're not about to say if you want an expansion team, submit your application by this date. We're not doing that. It doesn't mean at some point somebody may create a proposal that we find so intriguing that we decide to explore it and maybe pursue it, but that's not what we're doing now. Possibility of holding a global series in Germany. We've explored a number of places and we continue to explore. We played 2 exhibition games in Australia. Previously, we played exhibition games in China. We're continuing to look at all various places that have expressed an interest in having our games, whether it's pre-season or regular season, and Germany's on the list. So that was a pretty underwhelming article there on the NHL website. Let's have a look at news now about the NHL. Got it. The Coyotes, obviously, right. Leaves speak the wings. Jack Hughes returns to practice, so nothing that isn't already um, a thing. Right, let's clear that. Uh, let's have a look at NRL. Let's look at the NRL in Australia. Henry Arundel was interested in a rugby league switch. That was reported on Planet Rugby and in the Daily Mail. NRL clubs are interesting. Potential NRL clubs have reached out to potentially sign him, and that is interesting. Right, let's have a look at what's happening in the NRL. Signings, draft upgrade rosters for every team. Uh, not really, not really a lot going on. God, wait, let's have a look. Oh, the signings tracker. Let's go away. God, their website is so jerky. It's unreal. Press on one thing and it gives you something else. The NRL signings tracker update rosters for every team. The Gold Coast Titans have parted ways with Tremaine Spry by mutual consent. He was contracted for the 2024 season. He's played 5 games the club since he joined. Billy Smith is locked in until the end of the 2024 season, and Connor Watson is there till 2025 at least before extensions are considered. Right, well, so the Raiders have re-signed Hoafea Peru with an option, for next season with an option to extend in 2025. Melbourne, Tepai Moroa, Grant Allison, and Iremia have all extended until 2024 at Melbourne Storm. Oh wow! So Drew Hutchinson is now a Bulldogs player. Kurt Mann is now a Bulldogs player. Jake Turpin is a Bulldogs player, and the baby for Suamar Ali, Famuasili, Hoasa Famusili will all join the club until the end of 2025. Famuasui was released by the Dolphins. He's taken up a development role with the Bulldogs, so he's going to be a part of the 30-man squad. The Warriors, Adam Fanua Blake will remain at the club for this coming season. Right, so there's not. Yeah. Oh wow, there's really a lot going on there. David Gower's 158 and ODI better than Maxwell's 201. Well, that's an interesting one. I think the game's evolved since David Gower was playing. I think that's a good way to look at it. The game has changed. The style of batting, the style of bowling, fielding has changed, and there's been rule variations brought in. So to compare one era with another is it's subjective. People do it, but it's very, very difficult to truly compare eras. David Gower's 158. You have to look at the circumstances. Was that in setting a score? Was that chasing a score? And then Maxwell's 201. Maxwell is really an out and out short format player in comparison to Gower, who was more of a test player. So their style of play is completely different. The game has evolved. We've now got T20 in there, and Maxwell is definitely a short format specialist, whereas the short formats didn't exist when Gower was playing. So that's my view on that. They are different styles of player who fulfilled different roles for their team. So while we can say and then again it's subjective because you could say I think Brett Lee at Trent Bridge in the third Test 2005 was one of the best lower order innings I've seen from a player in defeat. He just went after the bowling and tried to keep Australia in that Test match. That was a fantastic session of play in 2005. Didn't score. I think he scored like 38 in that in his innings, but he was a very, very important part of that really going down right almost to the last ball on the last day of the last over. So, you know, um, again, it's subjective, very, very subjective. So, um, but as I say, the sport has evolved. That's a fucking thing. The sport's evolved massively in the time difference, and run rates are a thing now. There's more advanced analytics being used. The bats are different. You look at the size of a bat now compared to a bat then, the thickness of them. It's almost half. The sport's completely changed. Completely changed. Um, and so to give a fair reflection on that, fair comparison, is almost impossible. If you were to compare comparable innings in the same tournament between comparable players, that is a complete difference, and therefore you could make a comparison. They were playing in different eras. Oh God, this annoying, what a annoying thing. Um, well, as a fan of '80s cricket, uh, I still laugh at the ramp shot. Like I say, the sport. I've got this annoying fucking spot on here. It's itchy bit. Oh, that's all right. The style of play now with the ramp shot, and then you've got the shovel and the hook shots. And again, innovative techniques. There will always be like an AB de Villiers type player, a player who comes in who is a really aggressive batsman. And then you get bowlers who will combat that with bowling. You can get, and bowling really innovative ways with how they spin the ball, swing the ball, you adjust their grip over the seam, scramble the seam, back of the hand stuff. So cricket is one of those sports where both batsman, bowler, and even fielder have been innovative. Um, yeah, I think it can happen. I don't see why not. Um, you, I don't see why not. I don't see why that can't be achieved by a player or a team. If Maxwell's put up a double century, then yes. If he's got another batsman or maybe two batsmen, if he forms a couple of partnership with players and they're equally as explosive and they really go after the bowling, I cannot see why that can't be achieved. Um, what's the highest T20 score? Is it like 350 or so? We've seen some pretty high T20 scores as well, where the batting team has gone after the bowlers. They've read the conditions really well, and they've just attacked the opposition. We've also seen some record low test scores of like in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s for a test score in an innings. So records are there to be broken. Um, if there was a 500 in an ODI international, one day international, I think then that does shift the debate around the future of Test cricket and how the game is being played. Um, but the game has definitely changed. The sport has changed massively um, since I've been watching it since the early 90s. The sport has evolved massively, changed massively. It's a complete different sport to what I played at school to what it is now. Um, the equipment's changed. Um, the fitness of players is different. The international, the whole calendar is different. It's a 365-day a year sport now. There is no true off season because players in the southern hemisphere will go to the northern hemisphere to play, and vice versa. Now you've got the IPL, the Big Bash, you know, the Caribbean Premier League. There's a competition in Canada which is similar to the IPL. You've got the Bangladeshi IPL version. So the sport has completely changed, um, completely. Um, but a lot of sports have completely changed. If you were to go back in time, Look at old video footage of rugby league in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to now, rugby union, football, soccer to you, as in Australia, um, ice hockey, tennis. The tennis rackets have changed. They used to be wooden until the 80s. Some players, even into the early 90s, were still using the old school wooden rackets on the tour. The last 30 or so years have seen massive, massive changes in professional sport, massive changes. Um, and equipment is one of those changes. The changes in equipment standards. I'm just going to get a quick drink, but I'm still there. Got to get my loopers in. I've just broken my finger some more. I'm just going to adjust where the laptop is. I had actually done my back in. I hurt my back yesterday at work. I think I've strained a muscle or tweaked something in my rib cartilage because I was fine starting the day, and then partway through the day, my back went. So it's been a bit uncomfortable. It's better. Been a bit uncomfortable the last couple of days. Yeah, Beyond Borg. Yeah, but my job is very, very physical. There's a lot of moving parts. I've got a broken finger, and I've broken and dislocated my finger, and I've done the back in, but can't afford sick days, so I'm plugging along with a bit of back spasm and a broken finger. But no, sport has massively evolved. A lot of it's to do with the technology aspects, the analytical data, so coaching by analytics, and the equipment. Sport equipment has massively changed. If I was to dig out some of my old ice hockey tops and then compare them to some of my newer ice hockey tops, we're talking about obviously the fan replicas that you get rather than the actual on worn ice product. The materials changed, the designs have changed, and they've evolved. Um, Talking about AI, no, when I was at secondary school, they do like a career test where you fill in answers and tick boxes, and they try and work out. There's no wrong answers in this test. They do a career test thing where you get given a situation and how you would handle a situation. So you tick boxes. It's sort of like a personality test, and it basically they come back with the results of that test to say what likely career path you should choose with your personality traits, your strengths and weaknesses. And I was told I should go into hospitality. I worked in hospitality. It sucks. I was also told that I could be a good researcher. So this channel's based upon me doing, note taking with a notebook. And then I was also told sports scientist, actually looking at analytical data and looking at how athletes train and prepare, the tactician side of it. I was told I could go into sports science, which covers coaching to nutrition to analytical data breakdown to reviewing videotape, the whole lot. And I'm thinking, but I'm crap at maths, so that's the analytics out the window. Hate fractions, hate maths. Not strong at maths. Don't enjoy it at all. Not great with numbers, which probably explains why my bank balance is so bugging and why I can't budget properly. While I enjoyed playing sport, what I've noticed is I'm much better at dissecting it and watching it as a fan, as a neutral, and breaking down. Well, there's a tactical flaw there. Well, this is an area where defensively this side is getting up, they're numbering up right. Rugby union, rugby league, there's a clear breakdown there. There's an advantage for the attacking team or the defending team in that area. But the use of AI is being discussed a lot, not only in sport but across the board. But back in 2006, when I took this careers test, AI was in its infancy in regards to where it is now. AI had been around for a while. I play video games. You've got the video game AI, and I used to play a lot of video games. And the non-playable characters would do some really crazy stuff in certain strategy games, especially when you're playing a strategy game like Red Alert, Command and Conquer. The AI would do some really bizarre stuff. AI has come a long way in the last 17 and a half years. Yeah, I left school that long ago. Crazy. AI has come a very, very long way since I was a teenager. A very, very long way. But I would think that's a very slippery, dangerous slope to go down. Um, we've already seen some sports teams have analytical coaches. And when I say that, I mean coaches who do a lot of their coaching based upon pure data. Um, and that takes out of the consideration how physical the player is or how skillful the player is. And I'm using ice hockey and Carl Dubas as the example. He was GM of the Maple Leafs and he did a lot of his team building using advanced stats and analytics. And the team cannot win in the postseason. The team cannot only won one game in the second round, otherwise they don't get past the first round in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Great regular season team, can't get over the hump. He lost his job. He was gone. He's gone. He's gone to the Pittsburgh Penguins, a rival team in the Eastern Conference, and there was a lot of emphasis put upon you know getting going with a young general manager and using advanced analytics and stats. It didn't work. It's not working. The team is not performing at the level it should be performing at with the players that they have in an attacking sense. It'll be interesting if in cricket a team strategically retired batters on certain scores because AI said to. It's like when you declare. Um, if you're using advanced stats and strike rate and things like that, the only time that really works is in the betting market. If you're a betting person, if you're betting on a player to make a 50 or 100, and their batting average or their strike rate is much below that, then you've got really good odds for yourself to get a good payout if they do go on to get a 50 or 100. If these players regularly get 50s and 100s, you want to say it's going to double. That's when using advanced stats as a gambler, professional gambler, works. And there are some who are like properly on the spectrum. I laugh at that because I've got ADHD, who are advanced stats nerds who like researching this stuff. And when they come to play their fantasy football, their fantasy hockey, or their fantasy rugby, they put their fantasy teams together. And they do rely on advanced stats to do that. But for me, I don't like looking at advanced stats too much because that doesn't tell you the character of a person, doesn't tell you a character of that individual's part of the team. Or as part of an attacking unit, let's say on the power play in ice hockey, or a defensive unit in American football. It doesn't tell you about that person's character and how they communicate with their teammates. It just tells you about what they do stats wise on an average over a season or over a period of time in certain situations. Now, if you are an opposing coach and you can say, okay, this is where advanced stats can work. And not when you're coaching your individual players, but you're going team on team. You look at a team's record. So, for example, as I say, I'm a massive rugby league fan. I love my NRL. You know this. I'm a massive NHL fan. You know this. You've been a subscriber to the channel now for forever, it seems. I think you were one of my first subscribers, Mr. Neptunian. But if you are a coach and you're going, okay, our opposition likes scoring early in games. So in the NHL, for example, you've got 3 periods. This team likes trying to get a lead in the first and second period. If they're leading after 2, they generally go on to win. However, if they're only leading after 1 but not leading after 2, they go on to lose. That's where you can go, right, shut them down in the first 20 minutes or the first 40 minutes. We have a very good chance of winning that. Keep the game tight, disrupt the play. That means giving away a lot of penalties, that kind of thing. If you then look at, let's say, rugby league, this team doesn't do well in the last 20 minutes. They've blown leads in 6 out of the last 7 games. They've been 20 points up, and they're in a close game at the end. They struggle towards the end of a game to keep, to tie up the scoring. We can target them. They obviously their fitness isn't great. You don't need to have all the advanced stats, but you just go right. The last 20 minutes of games, England Rugby Union, for example, in the internationals, the last 20 minutes, England are terrible. It's a known fact. It's been a fact for 10 years. England in the last 20 minutes of a game it seems quite regularly, concede a lot of points. And you can go back and look at all the Six Nations results, you look when points are scored, and you look when it all happens. England, in recent years, I'm going to say over the last decade, more noticeable as the decade's gone on, the last 10 minutes of games, they struggle. It's a known weakness. So if you keep the game tight for 60 minutes, you will eventually get that edge and get over the line. They struggle in the last 20 minutes. Teams having to come from behind to win. They can only do that for so long. So that's where the emotional fatigue comes in. That's not using advanced stats overly. That's just going, right, well, normally in the first 45, 50, 60 minutes of a game, this team generally are behind. They're slow starters. So there are ways you can set up your team talk, tactics, structure for the day by looking at the previous 5 games your opposition have played. Their record into that season or in the previous seasons when you last played, that kind of thing. And that's not overly going with the advanced stats. This guy runs 13, 14 kilometres. This guy runs 10 kilometres. This guy has no nice time of 25 minutes. This guy has no. Just basic, using basic stats, you can coach your team and target weaknesses that another lineup has. But purely building a team, which Carl D was doing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, off advanced analytical stats, has failed badly because they can't take that next step, and they're starting to have average starters. And you've got to have that human factor because some players bring more than just advanced stats to the conversation. They bring leadership. They bring physicality. They bring humour into the locker room. They bring a light-hearted energy. They bring positivity. Various contributing factors contribute to how a team is made up. You need characters, positive characters around the team. I need that. The fact that I opened this yesterday, it hasn't gone flat, is amazing. It's amazing. But as you are an Australian, I'm going to ask this question too. I know there's other people viewing this. What are your thoughts, Mr. Neptunian, on the NRL deciding to take games to Vegas next year? What are your thoughts on the games in Vegas that the NRL are playing at the beginning of March, the doubleheader? Because I've seen mixed reviews from people. I'm in favour of it. I think rugby league, to grow internationally, it's got to crack the US market. Has to crack North America. Super League's made a mess of it. Super League's all over the place at the moment, over here in Europe. But I want to get an Australian's perspective on the NRL taking games to Las Vegas to start next season on March the 2nd. I just want to get that viewpoint. I want to get that feedback so I get an understanding from an Australian sportsman how an Australian sportsman feels about it. You don't like it. You don't see much of a market there, but you suppose if they have fun out of it. If there wasn't, because I'm going to say this. You would think it's very insular, but I'm going to say this. You look at how good marketing, regardless of the on-track product F1 is now doing in the US. Look at it. Just look at it. While a lot of people, myself included, don't like the direction Liberty Media is taking F1, they've now cracked the US market. They've cracked it. And it's noticeable. It's a fact. Viewership and interest in North America in Formula One and other forms of motorsport that aren't normally associated with the US has skyrocketed with good marketing. Viewership figures would suggest, and there is a TV deal in the US for the NRL, and we have to go back to the COVID pandemic and the shutdown and the fact that the NRL was the first, apart from I think a baseball league in either Japan or Korea, was the first major sports league in the world to resume play. and the viewership figures in the US went through the roof, the highest they've ever been. Over the last 3.5 years, now I obviously am on YouTube. I live on the internet. I live on I live on YouTube and I live on sport. Um, there are more and more American YouTubers either reacting to NRL content or discussing the NRL on a sporting standpoint. It's now entering the conversation, as is the AFL, and the viewership figures back that up because the NRL and AFL started resuming play much earlier than the North American and European sports leagues did. They got a head start in the online viewership and TV viewership. So there is clearly growing interest. The NRL would not go to the US if they thought they weren't going to get fans in attendance. They obviously know that there's an interest there. Vegas as a city, and I've covered this before, as a city is trying to attract as many sports as possible. It's already got the NHL. It's been a massive success with the Golden Knights. Now they're Stanley Cup, retaining Stanley Cup champions. They've got the Raiders relocated from Oakland. The Oakland Athletics, the Oakland A's, look very, very likely to relocate to Las Vegas in coming years. The NBA, I think, is looking at Vegas as a potential relocation or expansion market. The MLS is looking at Vegas as a potential expansion market. So Vegas wants to diversify and Nevada as a whole wants to diversify the state economy. Vegas and the metro area, which includes Henderson, is the population hotbed of Nevada. Reno is a secondary population center of that metro area, but the state of Nevada wants to diversify its economy. With the relaxation and growth in sports gambling in the US, the federal legalization, that has led to an explosion of betting companies who already existed overseas and new companies starting up, getting licenses to operate in the US. And now it's up to each individual state government to legislate. But that's brought even more money into the Las Vegas area. And then on top of that, it's a young population in Vegas. There's a lot of people from all over the world have moved to Vegas, not just the US, and they've taken their sports fandom with them. And the Golden Knights had a massive boost on the city. The Raiders had a massive boost on the city. The Super Bowl is going to be hosted there next year. So Vegas makes logical sense if you want to take games overseas. And of course, the US was meant to host the Rugby League World Cup in 2025 before they pulled out, citing cost concerns. Now, international rugby league is a different thing. But I do think that the way they've gone early with the advertising, they've gone early with the promotion, they're really trying to ramp it up. They've gone early with the ticket sales. I think they're doing it right. Now, I don't know what the response has been in the US, but I've already seen the advert that's circulating, or one of the adverts that's circulating. It's creating discussion on rugby league fan pages and on rugby league, websites where journalists are writing articles. It's creating debates. It's creating debate on YouTube. It's creating debate on other forms of social media. Try and get Americans to understand rugby league, NRL, Super Leagues, maybe special on-field graphics that use it. The thing is that the way the markings work on a rugby league field are particularly similar with the 10 meter lines very similar to the NFL anyway. Um, the game is less stop-start than rugby union. The ball can be in play for a lengthy spell. I think one of the longest spells. I mean, there was one match I was watching in the NRL last season, this season just gone, where the whistle didn't blow for quite some time. The ball was in play for a good period of time, 7 or 8 minutes without a whistle. And I think the whistle only went a couple of times in the first 20 minutes. So the ball is in play a lot longer. It's a game that flows. The restarts are quite quick. Um, it's less stop-start than rugby union. And we've seen Major League Rugby has now established itself in the US and Canada, so there is now a professional rugby union competition played, which is growing in size and scope. Um, but I think part of part of the reason I think why the NRL has decided to take this leap of faith, and it is a leap of faith, is the North American major leagues have already started taking games to Australia. The NHL took a massive leap of faith by taking 2 preseason games between Arizona and LA to Melbourne. And what was good about that is it was a win apiece between the two teams, and the crowd numbers were actually really good. And most of the crowd were local Australians. It wasn't US and Canadian expats watching. It was um, local Australian fans buying tickets and watching the product. And that was a massive leap of faith, a non-traditional market. And it was a big leap of faith, and I think it paid off. Um, the first point combination for Americans is what field position. Yeah, field position in rugby league is vital. It's very rare that you see a try start in your own 10-meter end zone. You based on your goal line to goal line in 1-2 phases of play. It's very rare that you have an end-to-end try. Basically, it happens, but it's not how most tries are scored. It's done by winning the field territory battle and that physical grind where it's all about the territory and winning the physical contact. But it's still, I think, a sport that will suit the US market. Uh, I think the issue that rugby league has had is it's been badly governed at various points throughout its existence. Now we're seeing really bad governance over here in the UK and Europe. Really bad governance. Not going to lie, I don't like the direction the Super League and the Championship has been taken. I don't like the fact that they've got this group called IMG into criteria and tiering clubs and grading. I don't like how they're going about restructuring the game over here and governing the game over here. I think Australia and New Zealand have got their governance better in recent times. It's still not perfect, but it's a lot better than what it was during the Super League Wars, for example, where it was literally a power grab, and the balance of power shifting. Um, so there is that. I think governance has been one of the main issues, and how the game is promoted has been a massive problem for a while. Big problem. But I think starting to get better in that regard. And I think the fact they've already got adverts promoting it now, 3.5 months before the game has actually taken place, is a really positive move. Really, really positive move, in my opinion. I think they're going about it the right way. They're getting the advertising promotion in there early, which we could argue with, let's say, Major League Baseball coming to London. They didn't do a great job promoting it. Personal opinion. Um, the NFL Global Series now, I think, gets less promotion because it's sort of established itself. But um, I think I don't know. I've got a bit fatigued with the London Series games now. The novelty's worn off. We still hear rumours of an NFL team for London. potential expansion past 32 teams for the NFL. But the novelty of the London series has worn off on me a long time ago. And again, that's personal opinion, and people's views will be different, and that is fine. Um, so there's that. Americans would also see long runs to get a try as being like running to get a touchdown. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities in the basics. I think what's really going to surprise a lot of new fans or new sports fans going as casuals just to their first ever game is that after one tackle, balls recycled, there's another tackle, there's another tackle. There's the potential for a set restart where they got what? There is the potential. That, I think I do think North American sports fans get a bad rep in a lot of cases where they don't fully come across as the most intelligent fan base in the world. Um, I think that's a stereotype that I've been guilty of as well. But I think from what I look with having this channel for as long as I have, and I've got a lot of American subscribers. I do. They are starting to come across as a sporting fan base, talking about the whole nation, that is now more open to watch new sports and embrace new sports and be willing to give new sports a try and actually, I'll watch this. I'll buy into this. The fact that the NHL, for example, we talk about traditional locations, we talk about expansion into the southern half of the US. And what I mean by the southern half is not the old Confederacy. We're talking deep south. We're talking about just south of the just south of Colorado, that kind of thing. California, Arizona, Texas, and there were some locations where they were struggling to draw fans. All you had to do was make the team a better team product that's actually getting more wins than losses and have decent ownership, and you can get really good attendances. I think promoting what you're trying to sell is important. I think Vegas is the city of self promotion. You could not have chosen a better location to have games played. Really couldn't. Um, but there is a lot of apprehension from traditional rugby league fans. But there is a TV deal already in place in the US to broadcast NRL and Super League games. And I'm noticing, especially on YouTube, a lot more North American, especially US YouTubers, who are looking at Australia and the UK and looking at our major sports leagues, our social activities, um, and discussing what we as countries do in regards to the sports we play as our major sports. Um, you know, our cultures, how they are similar, how they're different. So there's that growing interest where Americans of all ages are happy to discuss and learn. I think there is this stereotype that Americans come across as badly educated, ignorant, thick, rude, loud, ignorant, arrogant, and there's a proportion of every country that's like that. But from the interactions I've had with American viewers who've left comments, have been positive. They are willing to go, oh, thank you for introducing me to insert sport here that I wouldn't have otherwise um, watched before or engaged with before. Um, that is a thing. Um, some of my moderators are American. Um, but the view figures for the US though have been falling behind other nations. I have noticed that in the analytics. Is Americans are watching. It's probably my subscribers are the ones watching. But view figures as a percentage of views and number of views this year has been very interesting. are dropping behind other nations. Um, Other nations are overtaking the US at various points, and overall, I don't know if the US is still second, if they've slipped to third on the viewership. I know they were pretty close with Australia at one point. I think the Australians have now overtaken the US. Sometimes I wonder what sport I know nothing about that I could get into watching. Handball. There's quite a few sports that I know very little about. I mean, I think field hockey is a sport that I used to enjoy playing, partly because I was a goalkeeper in school, so I didn't do much outfield playing. But I've got a lot of friends who played field hockey. We call it hockey here, but obviously ice hockey is called hockey as well, depending where you are in the world. So field hockey, I played quite a lot at school. I've got mates who played it at a higher level. Who ended up playing at university. Um, I didn't mind the sport. Um, I think it's a I think it's a decent sport. I don't think it gets the coverage I think it should. It's a very competitive sport at international level, but it doesn't really get the coverage. But it is a decent sport that has the potential, if it goes down the right path and gets the right sponsors and a decent TV deal, to potentially go professional globally. Um, I think that's an underrated sport. It doesn't make my top 5 or top 10 list, but I'm happy to watch field hockey at Commonwealth and Olympics. World Championships. If and when I can find coverage of it, I'm happy to watch it. Um, I do think it's criminally underrated as a sport. Um, and here in the UK, we've produced a ton of great players. Same with Australia and New Zealand. Great players have come out of Australia and New Zealand. Same with Africa. The British Commonwealth has produced some top quality talent, as have India and Pakistan in the men's game. It's a very popular sport in India and Pakistan. Um, and I think it is a criminally underrated sport that, again, because it's not popular in the US, doesn't really have the same player base, doesn't have the same international standing. In order for a sport to really, cricket notwithstanding, but other sports, you've got to crack the US market. Um, Rick Charlesworth, I'm going to have to look at Rick Charlesworth. To play two sports at top level is very rare indeed. Only a handful of athletes I can think of have tried their hand at two or more sports and been successful at multiple sports. So that he'll be an interesting character to look at, without doubt. But no, it's quite interesting. We're discussing sports that I I I don't know many field hockey players in regards to current players who play for Great Britain, or the UK, shall I say, or and the Commonwealth for England and Scotland and Wales, and Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and that Canada. But when I do, he was also he was head coach. So this is where things get interesting. Um, he sounds like a very very interesting, not only sportsman but just interesting character. Uh, and I will have to look into it. But yeah, field hockey doesn't get, I think, the coverage that I think it potentially and should deserve. I think that's a fair, conversation point. Lacrosse is another sport that um, I think has the potential um, if it's promoted right, and again, promotion's key. Getting sponsors on board and media rights on board, even if it's a streaming service or YouTube, for example, getting accessibility um, to the product is key. Um, it's a thing. Lacrosse is Canadian, by the way. It's a Canadian sport. It is quite popular in the US, but it's also very, very popular in Canada, behind Canadian football, which is their version of American football. and ice hockey. It's a very, very popular sport in Canada. They did play it at my boarding school as well, lacrosse. So it's definitely um, an underrated sport. I think you can play it outdoor and indoor. So you've got indoor lacrosse and outdoor lacrosse. So there's slightly different rules and bits and pieces, but it's a very interesting sport. I've never watched a full game, I will give it that, but it's a very interesting sport. It is played at a good level in the US. There is an NCAA system. There's a semi-pro lacrosse league as well. Um, yeah, gymnastics. I mean, gymnastics as a sporting discipline, because you've got all the various gymnastic disciplines, such as the high bars, the pommel pause, and the floor routines, and the various other gymnastic disciplines within gymnastics as a whole. The only time that really gets a lot of coverage is when it comes to World Championships and Olympics. And gymnastics as a sport has faced a lot of negative headlines in recent years, with what's happened in the US, with the team doctor and all the abuse scandal, athlete welfare, a lot of negative headlines, funding issues in some countries, a lot of negative headlines, athlete welfare, including when athletes are, injured, um, funding issues, um, sponsorship issues, governance problems. Gymnastics, never enjoyed it. Never enjoyed it. Uh, I've got friends who were gymnasts and did enjoy it, and fair play to them. But gymnastics for me, I'm not a massive fan of the individual sports, basically. I'm more a fan of your team sports, and especially the contact team sports. I'm not going to lie, that's where my enjoyment comes from. While there are some individual athletes who are fantastic in their chosen specialism, for me, professional team sport is what I like and what I enjoy. Um, and that's again personal preference. I'm not saying you've got to be a supreme athlete to be a gymnast, supreme athlete. And then you look at the injuries they sustain; they really wreck their bodies. They're done by the time they're 30. Even before then, even in their mid 20s, a lot of gymnasts already done in the sport. Some stay in the coaching aspect, others go into the commentary aspect, and others just leave the sport altogether and go on to other things in the big wide world. But yeah, gymnastics not a sport that really I ever really enjoyed. I wasn't a massive fan of it. Um, but I can appreciate the skill required, the physicality required, and the fitness required to be a top level world championship or Olympic gymnast. I really can. Sport that's surprising when team cross country running. I did enjoy cross country, like taking part in it, and I did enjoy it when I was younger at school. I did actually do cross country, um, and gave it a good crack. But as I got older, I enjoyed track and field athletics and cross country athletics a lot less. Um, I've really gone off the Olympic kind of events like track and field. As I say, I enjoy them a hell of a lot less than what I used to. And I've discussed on live streams before my views on the IOC, the Olympics, the issues surrounding the Olympics. I haven't watched the last three Olympics, that includes Summer and Winter Games. Um, and I've just sort of fallen out of love with a lot of the sports that, you know, that take place at the Olympics. I think, but as I said, I did enjoy cross country. Um, it was good fun. And of course, you've got the various race lengths of cross country. You've got short format, long format, um, and you have the cross country world championships, things like that, and Europeans and nationals and stuff. They used to get televised quite regularly, um, but like, they don't really get the coverage that they used to in the 90s and the 2000s. I will say that. Um, but no, I enjoyed cross country at school, but as I say, uh, not really a massive fan of marathons and track and field athletics. Falling out of love with it. Also interesting in cross country at school, you can choose to run a higher age bracket with longer distances. Well, I think that depends on each country and each governing body within a country of what is acceptable. I mean, I post a link. That might end up going into the spam file. I've had issues with bot spam, and um, you, I think you could potentially post a link on a comment on a video. I think, but I try and avoid links getting posted and stuff. It does create issues. I've had issues with the laptop lately, as well as oh, I can research him. I can go back through the comments and look at Rick Charlesworth because he was a head coach of the women's national side when it came to field hockey. He's going to have a lot of information online. I can find him on Wikipedia. I can find him on other websites as well, where I can find him on fan forums. He'll be easy to research. If he was a head coach of a national side, he's going to have a very big bio. The fact he played two team sports at a decent level in domestically in Australia, I think he's going to have a fair bit of research to have a look at and read up. I have my phone. What are we talking? Rick Chatsworth. Charlesworth, that's it. Chatsworth isn't a horrible problem. Charlesworth. So we're going to have a look at Rick. Here we go. Yeah, cool. I've already found his Rick Charlesworth, former member of the Australian House of Representatives. Richard Ian Charlesworth, AO, is an Australian sports coach and former politician. I've already got. There you go. Already got information on him. Already on there. So let's have a look at his. He's an Australian sports coach and former politician. He played first class cricket for Western Australia and international field hockey for the Kookaburras, the Australian national team. I love the nicknames the Aussies and the New Zealanders give their national side. Winning a silver medal at the Summer Olympics in 1976. So he's won and winning the World Cup in 1986. So he's a world champion. He served as a federal member of Parliament from 1983 to 1993, whilst participating in the World Cup in field hockey in 1986. That's ridiculous. The Labour Party. That's also ridiculous. Yeah. After leaving politics, he was appointed coach of the Hockey Roos. It's a shocking nickname. The women's field hockey team. That's not a great nickname. The Hockey Roos. That's terrible. Think of your rebranding there, Australia. Do better. Leading them to Olympic gold medals in '96 and 2000. I remember those finals because I watched them. Charlesworth later coached the Kookaburras from 2009 to 2014, so he was the men's head coach as well, and also worked in consulting roles with the New Zealand national cricket team, the Black Caps, the Australian Institute of Sport, and the Fremantle Football Club in the AFL. The Dockers. Yeah, they know that's shocking. He's made some blunders there, working for Fremantle. They can't win games. I'm not gonna lie. Oh, right, okay. But he is from Subiaco, Western Australia, so he's from the Subiaco suburb of Perth. Right, he was a left-handed opening batsman. Wow. He played 47 first-class cricket matches. He scored 2,327 runs. That's not bad. batting average of 30.22. That's not bad actually for a lower grade opener. That's actually quite decent. He scored 1 century and 16 half centuries. His top score was 101 not out. He only ever bowled 8 balls, so an over and 2 balls. Um, he had 34 catches as a fielder. He got some pretty decent batting averages actually. He was the cricket master of Nick and Nudge. Nick and Nudge. Nick and Nudge. Who would Nick and Nudge is? Tell me who that is. As a representative at the Olympics, he obviously won silver at the Montreal Games in '76, which I've discussed before as being one of the worst Olympics of all time. Hockey World Cup was hosted in London in 1986. He won gold. He won 2 bronzes in '78 and '82. Oh, he was in cricket master of Nick and Nudge. Okay, he was a very fiddly batsman. He wouldn't last long in today's modern cricket, but back in the day, he's an annoying top order batsman who's a pain in the arse to get out. He's born in Subiaco, Western Australia. He attended Christchurch Grammar School, graduated in 1969. My mum, that's 20 years before I was born. Old. In 1976, he completed a medical degree from the University of Western Australia School of Medicine. So he's got a medical degree. Wow. So he's a smart guy. 2002, he received an honorary doctorate of science at the University of Western Australia and completed a Bachelor of Arts majoring in philosophy and history at the University of Western Australia. His father, Lester Charlesworth, was a dentist who represented Western Australia in cricket between 49 and 51. Lester Charlesworth was an Australian cricketer. He played 8 first-class matches for Western Australia. So he wasn't that great a cricketer. Cricket. He captained Western Australian state under-19 team before going to play A-grade club cricket for West Perth and University Cricket Club. He played 47 first-class matches for Western Australia from 72 to 79. He was a member of the Sheffield Shield winning teams of 72, 73, 76, 77, and 77, 78. So he's won 3 Sheffield Shields. That's not bad going. And was a squad member in the 74, 75 season of the winning season. Hockey. He was coached by Ray House, where he was most of the school's first 11 at an early age. He was a member of the PSA Hockey Cup, now known as the Ray House Hockey Cup, winning teams of 66, 67. Played and captained the Western Australia hockey team and the Australian men's team. He was left to represent Australia at 5 Olympics. He went to 5 Olympics. That is ridiculous. Or he was selected to represent, should I say, 72, 76, the boycotted Moscow Olympics, 84 and 88, winning silver at 76. He was a member of the national team which competed in various other international tournaments, including the Hockey World Cup in 86. He was player of the tournament in '86. This guy's mad. He retired from playing after the '88 Olympics. He played 227 games for his country and scored 85 goals. That's mad. He was inducted to the Australian Hockey Hall of Fame in 2008. Second person to do that. In 1980, whilst playing for the University of Western Australia, Charlesworth won the Olympians Medal, an annual award presented to the player judged by umpires to be the fairest and best in men's first division competition in Western Australia. And he's got an award named in his honour, the Charlesworth Medal for the women. Wow. From 93 to 2000, he was head coach of the Hockey Roos, the worst nickname. Sorry, it's hard. The Australian women's team, 7 years. He won the Champions Trophy with them in '93. In Amsterdam, '95 in Mar del Plata, which is in Argentina, and in '97 in Berlin, '99 in Brisbane, and the Hockey World Cup in '94 in Dublin, and in the Netherlands in '98. This is when Australia dominated field hockey. They were gold medalists in the Atlanta Olympics in '96 and Sydney Olympics in 2000, and the '98 Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur, which I remember watching as well. They were a dominant side back then. Prior to his appointment as technical advisor to the men and women's Indian teams, he was the high performance manager of the New Zealand cricket team. Wow. He was selected to act as an advisor to the newly formed hockey selection committee formed by the Indian Olympic Association. He's been a mentor and coach to several national team coaches with the Australian Institute of Sport and a performance consultant with the Fremantle Football Club. Not that Fremantle do very well anyway. So, 2009, he was appointed coach for the Australian men's national side. They won the 2009 Men's Hockey Champions Trophy in Melbourne, 2010 Hockey World Cup in New Delhi, 2010 Men's Hockey Champions Trophy in Mönchengladbach in Germany, Commonwealth Gold in 2010 in Delhi, the 2011 Men's Hockey Champions Trophy in Auckland, New Zealand, and the 2014 Hockey World Cup in the Netherlands. So he's won a lot as a coach. That's fair. Politics. He was elected federal member for Perth in 1983, representing the Australian Labor Party. He was a member of Parliament for 10 years until retiring in 93. He said one reason for retiring from Parliament was he never became a minister. No. He was a member of the Australian Sports Commission Board between 94 and 97, the Western Australian Institute for Sport Board between 84 and 92, and 2001 and 2005. Oh God, he's even written books as well. He's an author. He's written 3 books: The Coach, Managing for Success, Staying at the Top, and Shakespeare the Coach. Awards. Western Australian Sportsman of the Year 76, 79 and 87. The Advanced Australia Award in 1984. Member of the Order of Australia in the 1987 Queen's Birthday Honours. Officer of the Order of Australia in the 2016 Queen's Birthday Honours. The Sport Australia Hall of Fame in 87. The Hockey Australia Hall of Fame 2008. The Hall of Champions Western Australia 1995. The West Australian Sports Champions of the Year Award, Coach of the Year 1994 and 2000. Australian Coaching Council Team Coach of the Year in 94, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000. So, the 90s. Confederation of Australian Sports Coach of the Year 96, 97 and 2000. Australian Sports Medal in 2000. The Western Australia Citizen of the Year Award 2001. The Western Australian Finalist Australian of the Year 2011. Australian Institute of Sport Coach of the Year 2010. And the inaugural Australian Institute of Sport World's Best Award in 2014. So we won all those. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Oh my. Oh my. That is just ridiculous. Mad. I might have to do a video on it. That is just insane. You don't get many characters like him anymore. Really don't. He's had a very, very busy life in his 73 years or so. He's been a very, very busy man. He's achieved a lot. The fact he's been involved in some capacity in 3 different sports as either a player, a coach, an administrator, or an advisor is ridiculous. That's just mad. He also has an interesting coaching philosophy that when a team won, he would not mingle with players because it was as a player's achievement rather than his. So that's interesting. So he's a bit more aloof when it comes to the celebrating. That's very interesting philosophy. It'll be interesting to see what his former players in both the men's and women's teams have to say. The fact he's also been involved with New Zealand cricket, with an AFL club in Fremantle as performance director. He's clearly a very intelligent, very capable man. That is just wow. Do a video on him. The video I'd have to do would be ridiculous. So bloody long. The fact he played for Australia 227 times is ridiculous as well. Absolutely ridiculous individual. But as I say, we don't get characters like that very often these days. He was a very tactical hockey coach, especially unorthodox tactics. Well, would you call his tactics unorthodox once you've won a couple of tournaments? Shouldn't they become the orthodox tactics? Because to look at his success, not only as a player, but also as a coach, more so as a coach than a player. That's what's very, very interesting. He's more successful as a coach than a player with the tournaments, the national sides that he coached. Very, very interesting. That. And the player, he was very successful as well. Just looking at his profile, wouldn't that become the coaching orthodoxy? That's an interesting point. But I do find it interesting that he wouldn't celebrate with his players after a win. That's interesting. Very interesting. It'll be interesting to see, firstly, interviews he's given, where someone sits down and does an interview, uh, um, a lengthy interview with him. That would be very, very interesting to see um, what kind of questions he would be asked and how he would respond to them. I would love a documentary on this man. I mean, it's not often you get a character like that in sport, let alone um, someone who is as successful in multiple sports and has coached and advised and been involved with three sports and played in two of them. That is mad, absolutely mad. But it's also very interesting that his schooling career was cricket, field hockey. That's his younger days. That's where his path has gone down. Now, Perth today and Western Australia today, that's going to be very interesting what percentage play each sport. Because Western Australia is very, very, and you will know this, Perth is exceptionally isolated from the rest of Australia as a metro area. It's the most isolated major city in the world. It'd be very interesting today if he was a teenager today going through the schooling system and going through grassroots playing club sport, what sports he would be playing. You would have to say he has been to Australia. What AB de Villiers was for sale. AB de Villiers is. I've got to look at AB de Villiers. Actually, let's have a look at AB de Villiers because he's an interesting character as well. Very interesting character is AB de Villiers. Let's have a look at. He was one of my favourite cricket players as well. Let's have a. So Rick Charlesworth is AB de Villiers. Let's see. Let's have a. No, he's only a commentator at the moment. Okay, so he's gone into commentary. Let's have a look at what have a look at what they've got about AB de Villiers. He's a South African. Obviously, we know who AB de Villiers is, but new viewers may not. South African former international cricketer and a current commentator, AB de Villiers was named as the ICC ODI Player of the Year 3 times during a 15-year international career. And he was one of the 5 Wisden cricketers of the decade at the end of 2019. Regarded as one of the greatest in the history of the sport and the best batsman of his era. Yep. He started as a wicketkeeper batsman, and he was very good as a wicketkeeper, in my opinion. But he batted at various positions in the batting order, predominantly in the middle order. Regarded as one of the most innovative and destructive batsmen in the modern era, de Villiers is known for a range of unorthodox shots, particularly behind the wicketkeeper. That's the paddle sweep. He made his international debut in a Test match against England in 2004, and he played a one-day international, his first one-day international in 2005. His debut in T20 internationals came in 2006. He scored 8,000 runs in Test and ODI cricket, and he's one of the few batsmen to have a batting average of over 50 in both forms of the game. In limited overs, he's an attacking player. He holds the record for the fastest ODI century, 31 balls. 31 balls. Right. His Test debut, 17th of December 2004 against England. Last Test, 30th of March 2018 against Australia. His ODI debut, 2nd of February 2005 against England on the 2nd of February. His last ODI was the 16th of February 2018 against India. His T20, 24th of February 2006 against Australia. His last was 2019, 29th of October 2017, Bangladesh. Right, career stats. Test matches. He played 114 tests, 228 ODIs, and 78 T20 internationals. First class matches, 141. Oh my god. Runs scored in Test cricket, 8,765. ODIs, 9,577. T20 internationals, 1,672. First class cricket, 10,689. Batting averages, this is insane. Batting average Test, 50.66. Batting average ODIs, 53.50. Batting average in first class is 49.71. T20, 26.12. Batting average. So his batting average drops for T20, which I find interesting. Hundreds and fifties. 22 Test centuries, 46 Test 50s. ODIs, 25 one day international centuries, 53 50s, 3 half centuries in 50 over international cricket. T20s, he had 10 half centuries, no century run scores. And in first class cricket, he had 25 centuries and 60 half centuries. His top scores in all formats, 278 not out Test cricket, 176 in one day international cricket, 79 in T20 international cricket not out, and 278 was actually his highest score in first class cricket. Mad. He actually bowled a bit as well as being a wicketkeeper. He bowled 204 balls in Test cricket, took 2 wickets. He bowled 192 balls in ODI cricket, taking 7 wickets. And in total in first class cricket, he bowled 234 balls and took 2 wickets. Bowling average 50. That's mad. He took 222 catches and 5 stumpings as a fielder. In Test cricket, 176 and 5 stumpings as in ODI wicket keeping and fielding. T20, 65 and 7 and 506 in first class. He's captained Africa in all 3 formats. He stepped up the Test captaincy after injuries. 2017, he stepped down from the National Limited Overs games, and in 2018, he announced his retirement from all forms of the game. He retired in 2021. Abraham Benjamin de Villiers was born on 17th February 1984 in Warmbad, modern-day Bella Bella, South Africa, to Abraham B. de Villiers and Millie de Villiers. His 2 elder brothers, Jan and Wessels. He was educated at Afrikaanse Howes Second School in Pretoria, alongside Fafty Plessis, and they're still good friends. He is a high school graduate. His father was a doctor who had played rugby union in his youth and encouraged his son to play sports as a child. He was a right-handed batter. Thoughts, personal life. Wow, in his spare time he plays guitar and sings a bit. He's a bit of a musician. He's released a pop album. He's the most followed South African on Instagram. No, his dad played rugby. That's he was there. I don't think doesn't say anything about. He might have played field hockey at school and played, high school field hockey. But his dad was a rugby union player. So that's very interesting. He holds the records for the fastest 50, 16 balls, the fastest 131 balls, the fastest 150 with 64 balls, all in one-day internationals by any batsman. He holds the fastest 100 by South African in Test cricket, fastest 50 by South African in T20. He's a three-time ICC ODI Player of the Year, winning in 2010, 2014, 2015. So yeah, he's an interesting character. Maybe. But he holds some records, and I think some of his records may not get broken. But that is insane, absolutely insane. Some of his stats. On his day, possibly the best batsman in the world. No question on his day. Let's have a look at Faf du Plessis. Faf du Plessis is a South African professional cricketer and former captain of the national Proteas. He's considered one of the greatest fielders of all time and the best all-format batsmen of his era. He's also regarded as one of the most tactically astute, successful captains in all forms of the modern game. In 2015, he became the first South African to score centuries in all forms of the game. He was South African Cricketer of the Year in 2019. Fifth. Let's have a look at fifth. Oh, wow. Right. Faf du Plessis has played 69 Test matches, 143 ODIs, 50 T20 internationals, and 150 first-class games. He scored 4,163 runs at Test level, 5,507 at ODI, 1,528 at T20, and in first-class cricket, 8,798. Batting averages a little bit lower than AB across the board, although higher at T20 level. He scored an average of 40.03 at Test level, 47.47 at ODI level. T20 was 35.53 and a first class average of 39.27. Hundreds and fifties. Test cricket, 10 centuries, 21 half centuries. ODIs, 12 centuries, 35 half centuries. T20 international, 1 century, 10 half centuries. And first class cricket, 18 centuries, 52 half centuries. So not a bad batsman. Pretty solid. Top scores, 199 in Test cricket, also the same in first class cricket. ODIs 185 and 119 in T20 internationals. He bowled a little bit as well. Only took 43 wickets in his entire career across all formats. Oh, interesting. As a fielder, however, he took 63 catches at Test level, 81 in ODIs, 24 in T20s, and 141 in first class cricket overall. So he could field a bit. And most successful international captains with a winning percentage of 73.68% in one-day international cricket. Let's have a look. Sean Pollock. Let's have a look at Sean Pollock. Sean McLean Pollock. He was a captain in all formats of the game, a bowling all-rounder. Pollock, along with Alan Donald, formed a bowling partnership for many years. 2000-2003, he was captain of the South African cricket team. He played for the Africa 11, the World 11, Dolphins, and Warwickshire. Was chosen as the Wisden Cricketer of the Year 2003. Pollock was a member of the South Africa team that won the 1998 ICC Knockout Trophy. The only one they've won to date. Born in Port Elizabeth, Cape Province, South Africa. Wow, he's got a very famous family. He was a Test player from 1995 to 2008. Let's have a look. Oh, wow. And he could score centuries as well. Very good all-rounder. And he scored some decent runs for an all-rounder. Not a bad player at all. 11th of January, he announced his retirement after his 303rd one-day international. Pollock now works as a commentator on Super Sports coverage of South African cricket. In 2021, 2 years ago in November, he was inducted into the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame. Let's see who's in the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame. Oh, wow. First of all was in 2009. Well, Barry Richards played the fewest Test matches during his career. He's in the Hall of Fame with 4. Sachin Tendulkar played the most Tests with 200. There are 112 inductees in the ICC Hall of Fame. 82 are from England, Australia, and the West Indies. So 3 countries have the majority of Hall of Fame members. The other 30s are from the remaining Test nations: India, New Zealand, Pakistan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Zimbabwe. There are 12 women in the Hall of Fame. Um, wow, there's loads. Inductees: Derek Underwood was one of 55 inaugural members. Claire Taylor is one of 10 women who were inducted in 2018. Sunil Gavaskar set world records during his career for Test runs and Test centuries scored by a batsman at the time. Viv Richards is in there. Imran Khan, Steve Waugh, Jacques Kallis, obviously, is I think one of the best players of all time, in my personal opinion. Lisa, what's her name? Lisa Sthalakar, first player to achieve a double of 2,000 runs and 100 wickets. She's an Australian player. Verinder Sehwag, Afrinder de Silva. Wow, there's so 3 people were inducted this year. Let's see. Let's have a look at some of the players in here. Wakar Yunus says, would you play Hangout as being about the same level as Sri Lanka when Sri Lanka came on the scene? I would say potentially yes. Potentially yes. Oh, Frank Worrell's in there. Frank Woolley. Wow. Bob Willis, Everton Weeks. What a name. That's brilliant. Steve Waugh, Shane Warne, Courtney Walsh, Clyde Walcott, Derek Underwood, Victor Trumper, Fred Truman, obviously, Tendulkar. Wow, there are some great players in there. Sangakkara's in there. Wow. Pollock, Graham Pollock. So Sean Pollock's dad. I'm not sure about Bill O'Reilly, Monty Noble, retired Muralitharan, Arthur Morris. There's quite a few good players in here, actually. Uh, right. Richard Hadley's in there. Wow. Right. Let's get this. Everton Weeks. Take 10 points off it. Yeah, what's his name? Right. Let's have a look at the Hockey Hall of Fame. Ice Hockey Museum in Toronto, Canada. The Hockey Hall of Fame is a museum and hall of fame located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Dedicated to the history of ice hockey, it holds exhibits about players, teams, NHL records, memorabilia, NHL trophies, through the Stanley Cup. It was established in 1943 under the leadership of James T. Sutherland. The first class of honoured members was inducted in 1945 before it had a permanent location. It moved to Toronto in 1958 after the NHL withdrew its support of the International Hockey Hall of Fame in Kingston, Ontario, due to funding issues. The first permanent building opened in 1961. The hall was relocated in 1993 and is now in downtown Toronto inside Brookfield Place and a historic Bank of Montreal building. The Hockey Hall of Fame has hosted IIHF exhibits and the IIHF Hall of Fame since 1998. There are 299 players, 115 builders, anyone who's a team owner, an official, 16 on ice officials, 430 people in the Hall of Fame right now. List of members. The player category has been in existence since the beginning of the Hall of Fame. The first 9 players were inducted in 1945. Wow. Okay. Wow. Cyclone Taylor, what a name. New Zealand, Nell Stewart, Silaps, Didier Pitre, Bobby Clark, Daryl Sitter, Larry Robinson, Bjorn Salming, sadly passed away now, Mario Lemieux, Brian Trottier, Michel Goulet, Wayne Gretzky, Paul Coffey, Patrick Roy, Mark Messier, Glenn Anderson, Igor Larionov, he was a good player, Ryan Leach. Charlie Gardner, the first British player in the Hall of Fame, goaltender. A lot of Canadians, a lot of Canadians. Joe Hall. Let's look at Joe Hall. Joseph Henry Bad Joe Hall, what a nickname, was a Canadian professional ice hockey player known for his aggressive playing style. He played senior professional hockey from 1902 to 1912 when he died as a result of the Spanish flu pandemic. He won the Stanley Cup twice with the Quebec Bulldogs and once with the Kenora Thistles, and became hospitalised whilst playing in Stanley Cup Finals in 1919, which was cancelled 4 days before he passed away. He was born in Milledge, England, died in Seattle, Washington, age 37. There's Milledge. I was in Staffordshire. Oh, he was born in Staffordshire. Interesting. Let's have a look. We've got 2 Brits, so there's a lot of Canadians. All Canadians. Oh, Tommy Dunderdale of Australia, 1974. Thomas Dunderdale was an Australian-Canadian professional ice hockey forward born in the colony of Victoria, now part of Australia. He moved to England with his family in 1894, then to Canada in 1904. He played in Winnipeg for 3 seasons, from 1906 to 1910. In 1910, he joined the Montreal Shamrocks of the National Hockey Association before moving to the Quebec Bulldogs the following season. In 1911-1912, he joined the Victoria Aristocrats of the newly formed Pacific Coast Hockey Association, the PCHA. Playing 9 seasons in Victoria, he split his seasons in Victoria with a 3-season stint with Portland Rosebuds. That was a team named back in the day between 1915 and 1918. After the league folded in 1923, he played 1 season in the Western Canada Hockey League, splitting the season between the Saskatoon Crescents and the Edmonton Eskimos. Hockey Hall of Fame, he was inducted in 1974. He was born in Benalla, Victoria, Victoria, Australia, on the 6th of May 1887. Let's have a look at Benalla. Small city located on the Broken River Gateway to the high country northeastern region of Victoria, about 212 kilometres or 130 miles northeast of state capital Melbourne. And the population of Benalla, otherwise known as Rose City, 9,360. Wow. He became the only Australian-born player to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. He is credited with scoring the first penalty shot goal in ice hockey history. Let that sink in. Where were we? Right. So we've had 1 Australian so far. That was in 1974. Tommy Dunderdale. Right. Stan Mikita. Yeah, we know about Mikita. Vladislav Trejček. Bjorg Salming was the first Swede to get the Hall of Fame. Peter Stasny was in there. It's ridiculous. You got, now we're getting, most of them are Canadian at this point. Mike Vingle. Right, okay. So we've done that. Let's have a look at the IIHF. Let's have a look at the International Hall of Fame. Founded in 1997, and it's part of the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto since 1998. Right, 245 members. Ben Allah. The IIHF Hall of Fame. Let's have a look at the inductees in the IIHF Hall of Fame. Right, let's have a look. Members. List of 245 members as of 2023. So, you've got Guido Adamek, who's a referee who was elected in 2005. Bunny Ahern, who was the president. He was president of the IIHF from 51 to 75 on various periods. Um, and he was the last Great Britain team manager of the Winter Olympics. Wow. Wow. Player. There are some interesting people in it. Wow. Carl. Oh, here's one. Carl Erhardt. Carl Alfred Erhardt, born 15th of February 1897 in Beckenham, Kent. It's now part of Greater London. Died the 3rd of May, a year and a half before I was born, in 1988. Was an English ice hockey player who captained the British national team to numerous international championships in the 30s, including the 1936 Olympics in Garmisch. Earnhardt was elected to the British Ice Hockey Hall of Fame in 1950 and was posthumously elected to the IIHF Hall of Fame in 1998. British Ice Hockey Hall of Fame, founded in 1948, it's the 3rd oldest in the world, behind the Russian Soviet and the International Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame was founded by the wow. International Hall of Fame, the original Hockey Hall of Fame, the museum. Wow, some interesting stuff there. I think I got a bit sidetracked, but the fact there's one Australian in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, Canada, is pretty ridiculous. One Australian, and a couple of Brits in there as well. Mad to think that, you know, when we talk about halls of fames and goats and who's the greatest of all time, you can't compare areas. But yes, Cyclone Taylor sounds devastating. Yeah, some of the nicknames players had in various sports, to have the nickname Cyclone tells you that he was either very very rapid as a skater or he really had a good left hook or right hook. So there's that. But the fact that someone born in Benalla in Australia is in the Hockey Hall of Fame is ridiculous. I mean, and Benalla back then would have had a couple of hundred people. It's a small place in regional state of Victoria in Australia with just under 10,000 people. It's not a very big place. So someone from there to be in the Hall of Fame, Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, Canada, it's crazy to think that. Very crazy to think that. But yeah, it just shows the global reach of some sports, and some of the backstories of how people end up playing these sports as well. Is quite an interesting subplot. We talk about the background of how a player gets. It is tiny. Benalla, it would have been tiny then. It's tiny now. Well, it's got a population of just under 10,000 people, so that's not a big place. Uh, yeah, I mean the fact that I didn't even know that place even existed. So I like, where's this? But right, it's not a big place, and for someone to end up from there over in North America playing ice hockey later in life is mad. The journey that is quite mental. When you think about it, that's quite a journey. Back in those days, that's quite a journey. Um, and then we go full circle, and obviously a couple of months ago, the NHL is playing games in Melbourne in the state of Victoria, 130 miles to the south of where he was born. So we've gone full circle. One of the first players to play professional ice hockey in North America is from Australia, and we go full circle over 100 years later, and bang, there's the NHL playing pre-season games, Melbourne, Australia. So that's how small a world it really is. And how we ended up looking at random, career stats of players and coaches. And I think it was Um, Rick Charlesworth, we were looking at as the former field hockey player and head coach of the men's and women's teams in Australia, and then we ended up looking at random, just going through and looking at players and their stats. But again, I look at that and I go, well, Faf du Plessis was considered a very good batsman. His batting stats are nowhere near AB de Villiers. On batting average as a whole, they're lower. But there you go. I have a family member who is an engineer, and he goes around Australia inspecting structures. He goes to towns so tiny they can't field sports teams. Then they're not really towns, but by Australian standards, they're classed as towns. Whereas over here, they'll be classed as a hamlet or a village, or in the US, they'll be classed as an unincorporated community. Um, but when you don't have enough people in a location to field a sports team, yeah, that tells you your population's probably less than 50 people. Um, because you've got all the generations there. That's when you're really out in a very rural location. And there are places like that in the US. There are some parts like Texas where the local county, which could be a massive area, has like 80 people in it, 60 people in it, and there is no one living there. You could not fill 2 classrooms in a high school. Um, so when you've got a relatively going around doing it with their job, and they are going around the country, and it's like, oh, there's X amount of people in this location. They're pretty much ghost towns at that point. And that's like getting off topic a little bit. You know, that's rural depopulation is a big issue, and rural economies are a big issue, and so grassroots sport is a big issue. Um, and it's a big talking point in Australia is taking professional NRL and AFL games out into rural communities and regional communities because that's where a lot of the players come from. You look at city country origin back in the day, where you were from. You were from a non-metropolitan area and you were from a small to mid-sized town or city in regional Queensland and New South Wales. You were less likely to get noticed as a player compared to someone playing in Brisbane or Sydney. Oh, look, there's places here that many Brits have never heard of, small villages and towns that a lot of Brits have never heard of here in the UK. There's a lot of small locations um, around around various countries where you could be, from say Victoria, and there'll be a place in Western Australia you've never heard of, or Queensland you've never heard of. You live in the same country. There are some obscure places, and there are some interesting things you can discover in regards to that. There's never a dull day, I think, is a good way of looking at it. There's never a dull day. But in regards to rural grassroots development and the impact sport has on small regional communities is massive. It's a community focal point. Um, but yeah, rural depopulation is an ongoing economic and social issue that a lot of countries are facing. Is because jobs and infrastructure. There is that pull of towns and cities economically because there's less opportunities in rural towns and villages. There's less opportunities, and if you are a talented young athlete, you want to get spotted. You might go off to boarding school just so you can continue to play sport. You want to get spotted by talent scouts, and to get that recognition. And in the modern day, with the internet and social media, it is easier to potentially scout young, talented athletes. But it was very difficult back in the day, and that was another part of that draw to the bigger towns and cities is opportunity. Um, yeah, bank closures. That's quite a big talking point right now. Is accessibility to banking and bank closures. Considering the banks are making quite sizable profits at the moment, and the taxpayer still owns a fair chunk of some banks following the financial crash and the nationalisation of banks. But again, that's a topic for the other channel when I need to do some more content for the other channel. Actually, there's a lot going on in current affairs and big historical moments um, that are worthy of discussion. And I have some theories on certain things. I do. I'm just going to quickly check channel analytics to see how comments have been left on videos and any bits and pieces. Obviously, I did my club history of Cheltenham Town earlier today before this live stream, and I obviously discuss the channel update in regards to bot accounts and just how even a handful of bot accounts and spam accounts can really derail a channel and impact the algorithm and the exposure a channel gets. So that's interesting. Let's have a look at what's happening. Well, view counts are up a little bit since last night. I'll give it that. Content. View counts are up a little bit, which is positive. Recent comments. Maybe most obscure tiny time Australian sports team, Aussie rules manager of Walpiup and Underball to become oh right, so Walpiup Underball had to merge together in order to form a team. Again, this is where we've seen team mergers before. We're talking at higher level as well. This is what's really interesting, is that's not unusual. We've seen two or more teams merge together to form a new entity before. AS Roma is, I think, the most famous example. Well, a lot of people don't realise AS Roma is actually a merger of multiple clubs in the city of Rome. They tried to get Lazio involved in that merger and it didn't come off. It's a very common thing, especially in regional areas and rural areas where you have sports teams playing off the regional amateur league, and there's a shortage of players in a particular location, so they merge two teams together. They pool resources. It happens more regularly and more frequently than people realise. It's happened regularly in the non-league in English football. Walpiup used to be a science research test site for wood durability. Wow, that's interesting. These little quirky facts you find out when you're just on a live stream. Yeah, we found out that there's a Hockey Hall of Fame inductee from Benalla in the state of Victoria, in the middle of nowhere, in the arse end of nowhere of the state of Victoria, who played ice hockey in North America and is now in the Hockey Hall of Fame and was inducted in 1974. Who knew? Right, so basically you leave wood in the ground for 20 years and see what happens to said wood. Well, obviously, with native species, it's quite obvious. You've got the native bacteria and funguses and the mushrooms and things and native insects that live off rotting wood and all that. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if they were to introduce a non-native species of tree. Leave the wood on the ground, bury it, leave it on the ground or in the ground, and see what happens to a non-native species. I think that would be very, very interesting, but that'd be classed as an invasive species, because if you were to look in my communal garden right now, my block of flats, my apartment building, we've got native species. And so there's an ecosystem. So that'd be very, very interesting to see what would happen there. But that's a very, very quirky job. Chop up some wood, dump it in the ground, leave it, and then come back to it and dig it up in 20 years. That's mad. That is mad. I used to work at a similar facility doing soil sampling for acidity, toxicity, and yeah, fertility of soil. Um, Hated it, absolutely hated it. Do not miss it. Getting covered in soil all day, do not miss it at all. Um, if you ever want to look at the results of those tests, Cicero durability tests. It's interesting. That's interesting. I'm not really interested overly right now in wood, the speed of time it takes wood to rot in Australian soils, but because Australian soil is not particularly fertile, ironically. It's the least fertile continental landmass. It has the poorest soils, the weakest soils for fertility and nutrition and all that. So I would assume it would take longer for wood to break down in Australia, let's say over the UK, for example, and the biomass. Just, you know, but it's very interesting that there was that was the main employer in a region. Was it was a test site for working out, um, you know, how quickly wood rots and what species of wood rots quicker and how that benefits and impacts soil. It's mad. Someone obviously, scientists, something have to do this stuff because it impacts um, farming, forestry, building materials. Wow, that's why you know so much about it. Is because you had a family member working at the test site. That is absolutely ridiculous. That is mad. Could not make that up. But then again, my great uncle was an engineer, and he did a lot of civil engineering projects. He recently, sadly, passed away um, not that long ago. Um, but he'd been ill for a while. And he was a very interesting. He had a very interesting civil engineering job on some very very technical engineering programs. Um, Really interesting. Um, and I wished I'd actually asked more questions about what he did as a civil engineer and the engineering projects he was involved with, because some of them are still impacting, the UK today with some of his civil engineering projects. I've got a friend who works as a civil engineer as well, um, and a lot of the roads and railways and the related infrastructure you see around the UK, his department's responsible for in the Department of Transport. Um, but no, my great uncle was an engineer and a very technical engineer, a specific type of engineering. I never knew what it was, but I knew he was well paying because he managed to emigrate to France for a while in his retirement. So he joined the French Riviera, so it made him some money. He was very well paid. He was a very intelligent individual. And I wish I'd asked more questions about his job, what it entails, and all sorts. Cicero, Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organisation. Okay, okay. Um, I wonder how many facilities they have. That's quite interesting. That, and again, while we're going off sports topic, when we are going back to sports topic, we're talking about talent spotting talent out in these rural, small towns, regional areas, Australia or the UK, wherever it may be. Um, it's very interesting that this is going to be a major employer in the area. They're going to have to house the staff who work at this facility, and they're going to have kids, and those kids are going to go to school. Those kids are going to want to play sport as a part of the curriculum. Um, it's like Peter Sterling, former rugby league player. His dad was an Australian Air Force dentist, so he moved around a lot as a kid, um, which impacted where he was living and his junior career, which is quite interesting. Um, couple of high-profile NHL players in years past. Their parents were either Canadian military or Canadian Mounted Police. Well, Canadian Police, so they moved around a lot, which again impacted their playing days at junior level. Um, he got his degree from Sheffield Hallam University by chance in the UK before going to Oz. Sheffield is actually quite a famous. Sheffield as a university city here in the UK has a big sports program. The I believe it's a centre of alongside Loughborough, which Loughborough University is famous for its sports programs. And Sheffield, I think Sheffield Hallam, one of the Sheffield universities, or the University of Sheffield or Sheffield Hallam, big with the student games being hosted in Sheffield. The British Olympic swimming program is based in Sheffield. I believe the national ice hockey program is based in Sheffield as well. I believe the Elite League has its headquarters. Sheffield is a sporting city for a lot of sports. Oh, the short format university cricket. Yeah, they have limited overs, limited overs cricket, as it's known, and List A is another one it's known as well. There are other short formats that have evolved into the current short formats that we see now. Um, um, and again, Sheffield is a very important city in regards to sports development in the UK. So there is that. And it's very interesting. You look at the University Games was hosted in Sheffield, I believe, was it 1991, 92? When was the university? They did a lot of redevelopment of Sheffield for the university. They built a lot of facilities for the University Games in the late 80s to early 90s in Sheffield. Okay, you were a scorer for first grade school cricket. Interesting. At school in Australia, we play 65 overs each as one day cricket. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Um, I can't remember how many overs we used to play um, cricket at school. Um, was it 15 each? I actually can't remember how many overs we used to play per innings, actually. I haven't played cricket for that long. Um, I honestly haven't played for that long, but no, I mean, I didn't mind playing cricket, to be fair. It wasn't my favourite sport, but I didn't mind playing it. Um, but it's one of them where it's not an expensive sport to play, but it's not cheap. Not the cheapest sport because there's a fair bit of equipment like the helmet, the bat, the gloves, the pads. If you're a wicket you've got wicket keeping pads and wicket keeping gloves, and other bits of equipment like your box, you've got your arm guards. It's not the cheapest sport to play, um, but it is cheaper than some other sports. And it's a good sport to play. It's a fun sport to play. I'm honest. It's a good community feel with the sport. There's a local community club just up the road from me where I've watched a couple of games when they're playing. Um, so yeah, it's not a bad sport to watch. There's a community club as well near where my my mum and stepdad live as well, where I've seen games played. So and my stepdad used to play for them as well. So yeah, it's not there's a lot of community aspect to cricket at grassroots level. Um, I do think there is a slight disconnect when it comes to the first class domestic games around the world, and I think direction the sport's taking with TV rights and accessibility is a bit concerning, and governance. Well, the sport's kind of community level. It's fun. It's a fun. You get village teams or teams from a district of a town or a city playing rival from the next district down. The community level game is fun, and there's a good community aspect to it. There's a very, very it's just all round, good community aspect to it. And it's a fun game. Um, it's a fun sport to play and participate and be a fan of. If that's your thing. I actually don't mind watching cricket. I find it kind of relaxing, to be fair. I actually find it a relaxing sport to watch, where I'm not overly stressed about the result, who wins and who loses. I just find it a relaxing sport to watch, and just casually enjoy the game. Um, uh, Other sports I get more invested in, and feel a bit more stressed, a bit more tension, and a bit more passionate about it. But I find cricket nice, relaxing watch. I could watch a whole match at a local community club uh, playing another local club in the district league or whatever, however they structure the league structure, and I could watch a whole day's play quite easily. Just take some snacks along if the weather's nice, and sit on the bench and just sit on the bench and just watch the game on the edge of the boundary rope and just see how it all, and just watch them play without um, without getting too invested. It is interesting when you are doing this. I remember once at school I hadn't been very well, and I hadn't been selected for a internal house swimming. So we had 4 internal houses at school, they were subdivided, and we had an internal competition, and I wasn't selected because I hadn't been well. And the the swim coach basically said, "I want you to do all the scoring on the Excel spreadsheet. You're sat there with the laptop and you're putting in first, second, third, who's finished where, the aggregate team point score, the individual um, results, times for timings." And I was basically the admin guy for a swim meet, and it was interesting, different. I was also did a bit of cricket scoring as well, for a couple of games, because again I wasn't playing matches and I was did a bit of scoring, um, which was a nice way to just keep myself. I volunteered to do that with a couple of mates in the scoreboard hut um, back in the day. And it is interesting when you're doing it from an administration side of things, how you don't actually get to watch a lot of what's going on. You've got to focus on getting the scorings up, the results up, um, um, and it is completely different to when you're watching as a fan and as you're participating as a player. Even if you're on the bench as a player and you're waiting to participate, be it as a sub or waiting as the next batsman, it's um, it's very, very, very interesting from an administration point of view, how different it is, how that sporting event, it's like being at work. Well, it is work. It is completely different. It does give you a different perspective on how mistakes can be made on an administration scoring side of things, and the pressure officials are under when a mistake's made. How you correct that mistake and make sure, okay, the mistake's been corrected, and you fix the mistake. Um, I, uh, but no, it's. I did a bit of cricket scoring. I did um, when track and field athletics were on. bit of timekeeping and the bit of the Excel admin. Um, and it was different. And when you're learning, and I think it does give you a different viewpoint on things. Oh, you were old school with a scorebook. I did have a scorebook for cricket as well. Weren't always allowed the laptop outside with the Excel spreadsheet because we didn't have wireless internet back in 2001 to 2003. We didn't have wireless internet back then. Um, yeah, um, for inter-school matches. When we were doing inter-house matches, then you could just have the spreadsheet and then the results were posted to the school magazine a couple of days later. But yeah, this is back in the day before we had Wi-Fi and fiber optic internet. This is 20 odd years ago. It seems like yesterday I was doing the scorekeeping and the bookkeeping for swim meets, the track and field athletics, and the cricket. Um, and yeah, it gave a different perspective, especially when you were a youngster and you're learning about the sport. Um, and it made you, if you weren't able to play or be selected, it made you feel involved with the school, the team, learning about the sport. And I do have a lot of respect for officials now, like timekeepers and scoreboard officials, and on ice or on field officials or on court officials, or whatever the sport may be. I do have a lot of sympathy when they're under a lot of pressure, they're under a microscope, and they are going to get decisions wrong. They are going to get things wrong. It's going to happen. Um, it is going to happen. Um, there is going to be human error. And I think what we're seeing now with debate about the use of technology in aiding officials, video replays, and AI tech and goal line tech in sports, try line tech, and snickometer in cricket, and Hawkeye in cricket, tennis. Even the technology has failed. The A League Grand Final, for example, in 2018, the VAR completely failed. The only game to have a VAR problem that season failed. Um, and that this was on the eve of the 2018 FIFA World Cup, first tournament with VAR, and one of the, the three leagues that were trialing VAR the season prior. VAR failed in the final. Now people are going, "Oh, it's only Australia; it doesn't really matter that much." Now other people going, "Well, this shows the weakness in the system on the eve of the tournament. Rather than trialing it over the 4-year cycle, we're trialing it 9 months before the World Cup, month before the tournament kicks off. The tech has failed." And then the VAR had a decent tournament. Some poor decisions, but a decent tournament. And since 2018, it's gone all over the place. But no, I do have sympathy for you know the officials and the official time, those behind the scenes who do the timekeeping, the official record keeping, the match day officials on the admin side. I've got a lot of respect for them because they assist the on-field officials, they assist the referees or the umpires who are dealing with the players on the court, on the field, on the ice rink, whatever it may be. Like without the backup staff that we don't see off camera, behind the scenes, doing all the admin, doing all the bookkeeping, making sure all the results are official, wired up, saying, "Okay, now kick off again, restart," all that. Without that, you don't get the on-field product in. And there's a big debate in English football with the PGMOL and Howard Webb and the referees department with the performances of referees, the issues with VAR, and a lot of press conferences, and there's a lot of pressure on the Premier League right now as to why they voted against the implementation of what UEFA have implemented for the Champions League and what other leagues have implemented with a different VAR system, with different protocols. And there's a lot of questions about why the Premier League clubs voted against that. So when I did those things at school, much like when you were keeping score of the cricket and all that, it does give you a different perspective. because you're not actually you're focusing on your admin role. And yeah, when I did my career test thing, all those 18 odd years ago, 17 and a half years ago, whatever it was, sports administration slash sports science did come up as a potential career path that could be pursued. Um, Ultimately, I've decided as my hobby to have a sports YouTube channel where I go through these facts and figures and do my research that way. But it was interesting that was something that came up. Um, I actually believe sports commentator came up as well. Actually, sports media, I think, was all linked under that sports science, sports administration, sports research. Like, it basically came up as these potential career paths and what you should follow. Um, um, what throat guards? Well, look, the situation has become a bit more complex because we know the two players involved in the incident, Adam Johnson, who sadly passed away, and Adam Petgrave. Now we know someone's been arrested for manslaughter. Now we can't name the person arrested for manslaughter, even though I've named him as one of the players involved in the incident because of the English legal system, which is perverse because it's happened. He's been released on bail. In regards to, they're not neck braces are different. Neck guards or throat guards, depending on where you are in the world, what they're called. The Kevlar armor thing. I've got a thermal top. That's like an undertop that you put under your sports gear, keep you warm. It has like a turtleneck bit here. I find it very, very annoying to wear. I don't wear it very often. Only when I'm really cold, like over it's a thermal top. It's an extra layer, will keep you warm. In regards to making them compulsory, the English Ice Hockey Association, which governs the game below the Elite League in England and Wales, has made them compulsory and mandatory straight away because there's a developmental league aspect where there are players between the ages of 16 and 18 playing in the league, even though a lot of the players are over the age of 21. They've made it mandatory. The Elite League are making them mandatory from next season in 2024-2025. At this point, it is a voluntary but recommended piece of equipment. Voluntary, choose not to wear it. Okay. The IIHF, the NHL, these are the big boys in the sport, are saying again it's highly recommended but not a compulsory rule change at this time. It's a recommended piece of equipment, highly recommended, but it's personal preference. Player feedback is going to be key in two ways. One, equipment design, and in two, with the NHLPA as the players' union in the NHL, and of course the various other players' unions across the other major ice hockey leagues. Player feedback is going to be key. If the leagues are going to say it's still advised to use this equipment, but it's not compulsory, we shall see. If there's another incident involving a severe neck injury like that, which doesn't have to result in a player passing away, by the way. It could just be a near miss. Clint Malarchuk is the one that springs to everyone's mind because it was so gutted bad. No, it was. He nearly died. Um, um, if there's another near miss, like an injury, even if like escape becomes a slight graze, then the debate changes, especially if it happens in the NHL or in the World Championships next May. That's when there's going to be questions asked. There does seem to be a culture though that when you hit 18, you just ditch them. Players who wear them after their 18th birthday get ridiculed. There's that macho culture. You're a softie, prissy. You're weak. And that's not solving the problem. This is that time when we've already got the debate around CTE and load management and player welfare anyway. And, some players been forced to medically retire for other injuries that aren't concussion related. There's a lot of players on long-term injured reserve who are probably never going to play again. Um, and anything that can mitigate and make the sport safer, while still brutal and physical, they're still going to drop the gloves. They're still going to fight. There's still going to be the big hits. There's still going to be checking. Um, open ice hits are a rarity, but they still happen. Fights, bench doing brawls still happen. Rarely, but they do. Um, if we want to accept that, I think, yeah, the design of them and the comfort feel of them and making less distraction is one thing. Players need to give that feedback. When you've got senior pros opting to wear them again, that creates a culture shift. There are, however, those fans, coaches, and commentators who are old school in the sense of I was coaching and playing when we didn't have helmets as a compulsory measure. It was a grandfather rule. The last player to score a goal without wearing a helmet was in 1996. Every player that is playing now has always played with a helmet. Majority of the players playing now have always worn a visor, even though some of them technically don't have to because of the grandfather rule. They always play with a visor. As soon as that option became available, and it wasn't a compulsory rule but an optional choice, a lot of players have worn a visor. Um, so I don't know when the visor became a compulsory rule, but it was optional. I think it's about 2011, I think, and then it became compulsory. I can see this being phased in a similar way, but I do think um, sooner rather than later, especially with the growth of the game in the US, hockey mums, mum, you are going to see kids be pulled out of hockey programs and youth teams. If that becomes a consequence of the NHL refusing to bring in a rule, or the IIHF refusing to bring in a rule, then you are going to see parents, predominantly mums, going, I don't want little Timmy or little Sebastian, little Jimmy playing past the age of 18 because that is not a compulsory rule. Um, that's the thing. Even though it's compulsory for under 18s to wear one, what the big league does and the world governing body does has a massive impact on junior and grassroots level and lower professional leagues. What the big boys do does have an impact. If they are seen to be leading the way, players will stay in the game. Kids will continue to play the game and won't be taken out. Because there is a concern that it's a rough and tumble sport. And when you're trying to grow in the US, where, you know, parents are quite, you know, parent power is a big thing. Um, and if you can't keep, you know, kids' parents on board, they're going to pull their kids out of hockey programs. It's fact. It's the same with my mum, for example, wasn't keen on me doing martial arts in school, like judo and stuff, judo classes. It was too rough for her. But she was more than happy for me to play rugby and not only get lumps taken out of me, but take lumps out of the opposition. But she wasn't happy with me taking part in martial arts. Odd that, isn't it? It's how something is perceived. And then I think my mum only watched a couple of my rugby matches. She didn't like watching me play. Didn't like watching me play. But then again, my mum isn't really a rugby fan, if that makes sense. She's becoming more of a sports fan as she gets older, ironically. But when I was young, she wasn't really a rugby fan. Even though my dad played, and my stepdad's a big rugby fan as well, she wasn't really a rugby fan or a sports fan in general. Um, I think now that all of us are growing up, all the kids growing up, and all that, I think she's changed her viewing and thoughts on the contact sports a little bit because my brother played rugby for a little bit when he was a bit younger. Went, gave it a go, didn't enjoy it, and that was his personal choice. He didn't. Feedback from us to mum was important. If we didn't enjoy something, we was like, "No, I don't like this," and then it wouldn't be a thing. Okay, you're not enjoying it, fine. We're not going to push you to do it. Da, 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 da. What do you like? Oh, I like playing this or playing that. Okay, we'll encourage you then. Um, that's the sports that we're going to encourage you if you want to play. Um, but no, when you this is where I think the way they're trying to promote the NRL games in Vegas. I think some of the tackles in the highlight reel advert, one or two of them did lead to penalties. I think one did lead to a sin binning, but watching Cam Munster get flattened was quite rewarding, quite satisfying, and that was a legal tackle. So it was all good. He got drilled, and that went viral on the internet a few years ago. He got absolutely polarized. But no, the in regards to making the throat guards mandatory, I think it's a matter of time, um, and we'll see what happens with that. But I do think player feedback is going to be crucial in manufacturing changes to the quality and comfort, um, and then the NHLPA, for example, being players' union in the NHL, the biggest players' union out there, having feedback as well. The fact that a governing body has already said um, that the leagues it's the governing body of, which is the NIHL here in the UK, the junior development leagues, uh, the lower levels of the semi-pro and professional game, has said, no, it's a rule now, it's going to happen. I think does put pressure on the elite league and then puts pressure on other leagues around Europe because there are overseas players who are playing in the NIHL. Um, there are, you know, players who are playing the NIHL who will go over and play in some of the other leagues in Europe. I think it now puts pressure on the other leagues in Europe to bring in similar measures. Um, there'll be those who say it's a very reactionary, knee-jerk reactionary rule change. And there'll be those who say we've waited 34 years since Clint Malarchuk nearly died on the ice to get this kind of conversation going. And it's true. We have waited 34, nearly 35 years since Clint Malarchuk nearly died on the ice to be having this conversation. Um, and, you know, I don't think it's a conversation we should be having. I think we should already have this rule change in place and made it mandatory a long time ago. The sport is still brutal. It's still, if anything, the sport is probably more brutal now because of the speed it's played at. It's a much faster sport. It's much more physically demanding than what it was before. Sky Sports have secured rights to the NCAA football and basketball via an agreement with the ESPN that they will show March Madness. Yeah, it's an interesting one because we're talking about obviously sports rights and what's happening with various sports, and TV rights, and accessibility, and how many games are shown and such. Now we look at Sky Sports securing rights for the NCAA. It's very interesting that, considering that BT Sport basically took over the slot that ESPN UK used to have, and the owners of what is now TNT Sports and Eurosport, which used to be a sister channel for the ESPN. So it's very interesting that Sky picked up the NCAA TV rights. To be honest, it doesn't really massively impact me. I'm not a basketball fan. I'm not really an American football fan anymore. I understand there is a passionate, collegiate sporting fan base in the US. Not sure how big the NCAA sport, collegiate divisions are in regards to sports fans over here, but there are over a quarter, nearly 300,000 Americans, US citizens living in the UK. So there is a large US population living over here, for either retired over here, expats, here for work, here in the military. There is a large American population in the UK. It's around, is it 275 to 300,000? It depends on what source you read, but it's about a quarter of a million to a third of a million Americans are living in the UK right now, um, which is really interesting. So there's a large, sizable, and I think last year 14,000 extra US citizens came over here. So there is that. Am I watching? There's the potential for a market there to broadcast the NCAA games of basketball and college football, absolutely. But what the viewership figures will actually be like with non-American residents, British nationals over here, will be another thing entirely how that works out. But if they were to get 300,000 viewers, that's a decent return, I think, out of X amount of people who have a Sky package. That's not a bad return for some viewership figures. It'd be pretty reasonable if they can get every single American to watch the NCAA, or at least a portion of the Americans over here to watch. That would be a fair result, I'd have thought. Am I watching the Cricket World Cup? No, I'm not. It's going on for a long time. 50 over has had it daily to make it 40 overs. Well, first class domestic one day games are 40 overs, but the international games 50 overs. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, is it being promoted in the right way? That's the question that should be asked: is it being promoted? Is it being, really? Is it accessible? I don't know if it's had its day or not. I don't mind, 50 over one day cricket. I find it a good balance between Test cricket and T20. The 40 to 50 over format, the one day format, because at county cricket level in England it's 40 over. Let that sink in. I'm not a. I think if it was properly promoted, the one day format at 40 or 50 overs per team works really well. It's properly promoted. The problem is it's not properly promoted, and that lies with the governing bodies of cricket, the ICC, and obviously the ECB for England, Wales, Cricket Australia in Australia, for example. The various governance side of it, they're not promoting it very well. It's a format that should be pretty solid. It's not well promoted. But the Cricket World Cup, much like the Rugby World Cup, has dragged on a bit. Some of the games' attendances have been woeful. The quality of pitches hasn't been great. I've been criticised by players. But no, I haven't watched it. I've been sort of keeping up to date with results and who's playing who and stuff, but I haven't been watching it at all. I haven't been watching the highlights. England obviously had a disastrous defence to their World Cup. Their World Cup defence was disastrous. They didn't do very well. And there's a lot of questions being asked of Robert Key and his administration. I think on the playing side of the ECB and some of the coaching, the selections, quality of players' form going in, why England play so badly. A lot of questions asked about performances over in India, the preparation of the team. Too much focus on the test side of things, not enough focus. You can't win. We put a lot of focus into the Cricket World Cup 4 years ago, not enough focus on the test side. You can't win. But I think where the ECB have got things wrong is the 100 other players overplaying, the 100 format being crap and just shouldn't exist, but does. Various things. Player burnout, players playing too much. And there'll be those who say, oh, it's not the most physical game. No, cricket is not as physical as some other team sports. But it's still a very draining sport when you're out in the batting or fielding all day in the heat. when you are playing a lot of matches in a very short space of time. It's very mentally and physically draining. Um, very long days, very long days, and that's a lot of cricket to play. And again, load management's been discussed, and resting players and allowing players a bit of time off, to rest and recuperate. Um, it's a thing. That discussion is going to continue on and on and on. The inquest into England's shambolic World Cup defence will, run on for a bit, and we may see some changes with selectors and coaches. And, changes. Yeah, I mean, India can be really testing conditions. My mum used to go to India a lot with work, and she found the temperatures are very oppressive, the humidity very oppressive, and of course they're told not to drink the local water. You've got to drink bottled water, and if you're not from India, there's the risk of cholera and other digestive illnesses that can upset stomachs. Um, but no, there's been you know uh, yeah, playing in the subcontinent can be very physically draining. Delhi belly, well, literally, really bad with waterborne illnesses, and yeah, dysentery and cholera are a thing. They can knock you for six. I don't think you want amoebic dysentery, because you will shit yourself to death. Quite literally, you will be shitting yourself to death for several days. It's horrible. Um, really, really don't want it. My dad's girlfriend caught dysentery in Egypt once, and because she's diabetic, that nearly killed her. Really don't want anything like this. So you've got to be very, very careful. And since my mum last went to India, she's had several health issues, so she's not been 100% since she was last in India, which was in 2019, just before the pandemic really hit. She's not been well for the last 4 years. She's had um, several issues, um, health wise. She's not been 100%. Um, and yeah, so, but I mean, India is a fantastic country, but playing cricket and field hockey over there, players are, yeah, it's regularly known that players are really wiped. Rugby Australia chairman has received a letter from state and territories unions urging him to resign if he gets fired. Um, who is in charge of Rugby Australia at the moment? Because obviously, with what happened at the World Cup and their failure to get out the pool stage, the record-breaking defeat to Wales, um, poor Hamish McLennan. Um, I look. I think Rugby Australia has been buggered for about 20 years, but the real low point was Ryling Castle and the Israel Palau saga 5 years ago, whenever it was. That did a lot of reputational damage. The collapse of the Super Rugby system as it was, um, and Rugby Australia's got a lot of issues. And the Israel Palau saga was a massive part of the situation that we now have. It's a forerunner to it, and her tenure was a shambles. The reliance on rugby league mercenaries to plug gaps that rugby union clearly isn't plugging themselves, so player development, and also the talent drain to the European and Japanese and North American leagues is plain and obvious. Um, and the selection rules to get into the national side are you have to be the Matt Gitto rule. I mean, rugby union is really behind the times, if we're honest. But if he's received an open letter from state and territory unions saying go, um, you've got to go, um, we'll see. But at the same time, the Rugby Australia board might go, bye. But the fact that, you know, Rennie got sacked. Eddie Jones gets put in. He quits. What 9 months into a 5-year contract. They'll be looking for their third coach in a calendar year. Worst ever Rugby World Cup performance. Um, yeah, I mean they're in trouble. They are in trouble. It, the appointment of Eddie Jones went down like a sack of shit to begin with, and Dave Rennie getting sacked went down like a sack of shit with the players, the playing group, not just those who are already part of that Wallabies core setup, but other Australian players who wanted to be selected for the World Cup, putting their hand up going, I'm playing well. There are players who got overlooked. There were players who could have been brought in, even if they weren't experienced players, even if they were uncapped. It doesn't matter. Uh, Eligible players were overlooked. There are players in form that were overlooked. There were veteran players who could have made a difference with leadership and bringing that calming influence to a young squad overlooked, left behind. Yeah, the whole thing didn't particularly go well, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if he's given the chop, if he quits, if he's sacked, if he tries to soldier on. I mean, I think he's lost the confidence of the unions, but the confidence is gone. It's now up to the Rugby Australia board, I think, to review his position if he doesn't decide to go first. But if he goes, who replaces him? Who is going to be willing to take on the job of fixing Rugby Union Australia? Because it's not in a good place right now. Let's be honest, it's not in a good place. And it's not going to be an easy fix. Yes, hosting the World Cup in 4 years' time is part of that process. But Campese, oh, God, gobshite he is, administrator he is not. It's like trying to say, oh, he was a great player back in the day, he's going to make a great administrator. That's not necessarily the case. He was a very divisive player, very controversial player. I'm not necessarily sure throwing in the firebrand that is David Campese is going to fix the problems. But there needs to be reform of Rugby Australia as well. And they need to look at the grassroots development. That is key because that's where they're losing ground to the NRL and AFL in Australia. They're losing ground to Aussie rules and rugby league. And until they lose that kind of elitist stereotype, they're going to continue to lose ground because most people in Australia will see themselves as tradie working class types. A lot. It is seen as an elitist sport. The TV deal was crap. It doesn't get as much exposure to the wider sporting fan base, and the team is not feared anymore. Wallabies is not feared as one of the Southern Hemisphere heavyweights anymore. They're seen as the weakest of the Southern Hemisphere teams, and that is the Tier 1 nations in the Southern Hemisphere. They are the weakest by some margin. There seems to be an idea that just because a person can play a sport doesn't mean they can be the background administrator. I think if an ex-player wants to get into administrative role, they can. But it's making sure it's the right person who goes into administration, be it player development, scouting, day to day. Rob Underwood's done a terrible. Look at the RFU. With Underwood, no, it doesn't. It really superstar players do not make great administrators. Solid players make solid administrators, but superstar players don't. It's yes, I'm very, very keen to get ex-players involved in sports administration and with feedback, rule changes and equipment changes. And that player involvement and ex-player involvement is crucial. But just because someone was a superstar player, yeah, superstar players don't make the best administrators or coaches. Normally, it's the average run-of-the-mill squad player who actually makes the best administrator or coach. Ironically, however crazy that may be, it's more of the squad player, the depth guy who actually makes the best administrator. What do I think superstars don't make good administrators or coaches? Too much ego. I think yeah, there's a bit of that. I don't know. It's a difficult one, but the track record is generally, they, yeah, maybe they've earned too much money. Um, um, but you look in other sports how it just doesn't work out. Um, you know, um, I think rugby union. I think players transition to coaching, and same with rugby league seems to work better. Ice hockey as well. Yeah, superstars don't make great captains. They really don't. They're normally very petulant, very egotistical, bit narcissistic, to be fair, and very selfish. Generally, um, the best captains normally are the best all-round team guy, um, and sometimes they are the most senior guy in the team. Ironically, the veterans. Um, but no, the superstar captain dynamic, I don't buy into it making a superstar talented player necessarily the best captain. Um, a lot of them are showboating, um, arrogant, selfish, um, and immature, quite frankly. They've got an overinflated ego that needs to be stroked all the time, and they get away with too much. They're overly pampered, they're petulant. The list goes on. No, normally it's that grizzled veteran or that grizzled kind of squad guy who does all the grunt work, as I call it. Um, Football, it'd be the box to box midfielder. In ice hockey, it'd be the third pairing defenseman or the fourth line checking guy, who's the heart or the two-way forward who's going for a Selkie award. Who's a second or third line centre in ice hockey, two-way forward. Does a bit of everything. Um, Rugby union, it would be like a second row or a prop or a hooker. Generally, good captains and also good administrators and commentators as well. Um, Rugby league, it'd be the interchange, kind of utility player. You can play a bit of everything. You can cover in the forwards, you can cover in the backs. Normally as a back row or a centre or as a lock. Um, and they do a bit of everything. They're the firefighters of the team. Yeah, normally they're the best captain. They're the best coaching and administration. But no, I think, yeah, those kind of superstar, really skillful kind of players, they don't make great captains. They don't make great captains at all. It's all about them. They've got to be the centre of attention. Um, and they don't make great captains. They've got the wrong personality traits. And if you can get your superstar player off his game when he's the captain and he has a poor performance, there's even more pressure and more speculation and more media circus surrounding them, which can negatively impact the team. When the superstar is creating negative headlines, it reflects badly on the team. When reality, especially when they're captain, they've got to front the media more. And if they've got that bad boy image, it's very difficult for them. Or there's an off-field incident, which often happens with superstar players. They get regularly embroiled in off-field antics. It reflects badly on the team. If they're part of that leadership group and they misbehave a lot, they're petulant, they're spoiled, and they party all the time. It reflects badly on the organisation, the coaching setup, the team, the board. It does reflect badly. So no, they don't make great captains generally. Sometimes a superstar player's got his head screwed on. He's just the best player and he's also the best leader, but it's exception rather than the rule. They're the ones who are the best leaders. Normally, it's the guys who are the heart and soul of the locker room, who bleed for the team, shovel shit for the team, do the dirty work for the team on and off the field, who are the true leaders, really. They normally are the ones who are the most liked in the community away from the game with their community work. They're the ones who have the least social media presence, so they're not obsessed with their social media accounts. They're the ones who have a low profile off the field, where they just have a quiet family life. They're generally the ones who are the best captains and the best administrators and coaches as well, because they're dedicated to their sport. They're dedicated to studying the game. I do think we do need more involvement with ex-players in administration when it comes to rule changes, when it comes to um, various things that involve changing certain aspects of sport. Not necessarily to be the out and out head of the organisation, but it just involved in feedback with the administration, working in various governance departments, and that includes refereeing as well. Um, you know, actively being involved in proactive rule changing, consultation, um, being a good pathway between the governing body and sports teams, having that kind of role where there could be a mediator or any kind of thing. But it's also about identifying those ex-players who have the right skill set and the right motivation to be pretty good in administration in some capacity, and working with a governing body uh, in a capacity that could be useful. There are those who are actually quite, you've got to have the right relationship between a governing body and a league and a sport and clubs, and sometimes getting ex-players involved is vital. And some ex-players do have a lot of input to give, saying this is what's going wrong with our sport. We've got issues with grassroots development. Media relationships are great. We could do more in the community, various things. Equipment changes. You need player feedback. You need a conduit for player feedback through ex-players into the governing body of the administration of a league. You need that feedback. So there is a role for them within sport, sports governance. But to be the head of an organisation to fix it all, that's a PR stunt. Doesn't work. Doesn't work when you've got the superstar, especially if they're a divisive player and they were a bit of a firebrand character. That's not going to fix things. Anyway, I've been going for nearly 4 hours. I'm going to call that a live stream. I need to do a bit of shopping. It's nearly 1 o'clock. It's just gone 12:30 in the afternoon my time. So I'm going to call that a live stream. I need to do housework, shopping, and then come up with a bit more, some more video ideas for the channel, a bit more research. I've got a couple more club histories and football I want to look at, and there's a couple of other areas, some other ideas I've got floating around that I want to get sorted. But for me for now, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate the discussion we've had, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.